If you don't subscribe to the channel, all the stories will happen to you. Get ready for the nightmare. The night was colder than expected. The mall, usually bustling, was almost empty at this hour. I had stayed longer than I planned, and as I walked out through the glass doors leading to the parking lot, I regretted parking so far. The yellow lights scattered across the lot seemed dim, almost swallowed by the surrounding darkness. The wind bit at my face as I quickened my pace toward my car, clutching my bag tightly. I wasn't scared at first, just a little uneasy. The echo of my footsteps bounced off the asphalt, and I scanned the area. Everything seemed normal. My car sat a little too far, and I cursed myself for not parking closer. Then I felt a subtle sensation of being watched. My heart skipped a beat. I glanced over my shoulder, but there was no one there. Just an empty parking lot. I shook off the feeling and kept walking, but then I heard it, a faint shuffle. It was soft, barely audible over the wind, but it was there. I stopped, listening closely, and for a moment, everything was silent. Too silent. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a movement, a shadow slipping between the cars. My stomach knotted. Someone was there, watching me. I started walking faster, heart pounding in my chest, keys clenched in my hand. The footsteps behind me became more distinct, picking up speed to match my own. I glanced back again, and this time I saw him. A man, dressed in dark clothes, his head pulled low over his face. He was close enough now that I could see his eyes glinting in the dim light. He wasn't hurrying, but he wasn't slowing down either. He was following me. Fear surged through me as I broke into a near run, practically sprinting to my car. My hands trembled as I fumbled with my keys, trying to unlock the door. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until I could hear his breathing behind me. Finally, the lock clicked, and I threw myself into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut just as the man appeared next to my window. He stood there, staring at me through the glass, his face hidden in the shadows, but his eyes were cold, unblinking, like a predator waiting for its prey. For a long, terrifying moment, we just stared at each other. Then, without a word, he stepped back, melted into the darkness, and disappeared between the rows of cars as if he had never been there at all. But the lingering sense of dread told me otherwise. He had been real, and I knew this wouldn't be the last time I saw him. The drive home felt like an eternity. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that same hooded figure following me in the shadows. But the road behind me was empty. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the familiar sight of my house did little to calm my nerves. I hurried inside, locking the door behind me and double-checking every window. The house was dark and quiet, but instead of feeling safe, I felt trapped. The stranger's cold, predatory stare haunted me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, watching. I tried to distract myself, but every creak of the house and every gust of wind made my heart race. I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall, each second dragging on for what felt like minutes. My phone buzzed on the table, startling me out of my thoughts. It was a message from my best friend, Emily. Emily, hey, are you okay? You seem off today. I stared at the message, unsure if I should tell her what had happened. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was just some random guy, and I was being paranoid. But something deep down told me that this was more than just a fleeting encounter. I typed a quick reply. Me? I'm fine. Just had a weird experience at the mall. Some guy followed me to my car. Kinda creeped me out. She responded almost immediately. Emily, what? That's not okay. You need to report it. Do you want me to come over? I hesitated. Part of me wanted her here, just to feel safer. But another part of me didn't want to worry her over something that might be nothing. Me, it's late. I'll be fine. Just freaked out a little. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Emily, okay, but call me if anything happens. Seriously. I promised I would and put my phone down, trying to convince myself that everything was fine. But the thought of that man's cold, unblinking eyes wouldn't leave my mind. Sleep didn't come easy that night. I tossed and turned, unable to get comfortable. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined him standing outside my window, watching me through the curtains. I kept hearing phantom sounds, the rustle of leaves, the crunch of footsteps, the soft creak of floorboards that made me sit up in bed, holding my breath. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I drifted into a restless sleep. But even in my dreams, he was there, lurking in the shadows. When I woke up the next morning, the fear hadn't faded. If anything, it had grown worse. As I made my way to the kitchen, I noticed something on the floor just inside the front door. My heart sank. It was a single piece of paper, folded neatly and slid under the door. Hands shaking, I picked it up and unfolded it. Written in a sharp, jagged scrawl were 3 words. "I'm still watching." My blood ran cold. I stumbled backward, clutching the note in disbelief. How did he know where I lived? How had he gotten this close without me hearing him? I dropped the note and ran to check the locks again, but everything was as I had left it, secure. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. He had been here. Sometime during the night, while I had been lying in bed, he had come to my door, silently leaving this note as a twisted reminder that I wasn't safe. The stranger wasn't just following me anymore. He was stalking me. I stood frozen, my mind racing as I stared at the note. The jagged handwriting, the chilling message. It was all too real. He had been here, and I hadn't even known. My thoughts spiraled into a whirl of fear and confusion. How long had he been watching me? What did he want? I needed help. Without thinking, I grabbed my phone and called Emily. My fingers trembled as I held the phone to my ear, pacing back and forth across the living room. It rang twice before she picked up. "Hey, what's wrong?" Her voice was laced with concern. "Emily, I don't know what to do," I blurted out. "That guy from the mall, he left a note at my door last night. He knows where I live." "What? Oh my God. Did you call the police?" "I haven't yet. I'm scared, Emily. What if they don't believe me? What if they say it's just a prank?" "They have to take it seriously." Emily's voice was firm. "This isn't something to mess around with. I'm coming over, okay? Don't do anything until I get there. We'll figure this out together." I felt a small wave of relief wash over me. "Okay, just hurry." Hanging up, I tried to keep myself calm, but the weight of the situation bore down on me. Every noise outside felt like a threat. I could barely sit still, moving from the window to the door, checking for any sign of him. But the street was eerily quiet, like it was holding its breath. Emily arrived within 15 minutes, and I practically threw the door open when she knocked. She took one look at me and hugged me tight. "We'll get through this," she said, pulling back to look me in the eyes. "But first, we're calling the police." I nodded, grateful for her strength. Together, we sat on the couch as I dialed 911. The operator's voice was calm and professional, but my words came out in a panicked rush as I explained everything. The stranger at the mall, the note, the stalking. "We'll send someone over to take a statement and check the area," the operator assured me. "Please stay inside and don't open the door for anyone until officers arrive." I hung up and let out a shaky breath. At least help was on the way. Emily squeezed my hand, offering silent support. "Do you think he's still watching?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," she admitted, glancing nervously at the window. "But the police will handle it. We just need to stay calm." Minutes felt like hours as we waited. Every creak of the house, every passing car outside made me jump. Finally, there was a knock at the door. Emily and I exchanged a look, and I hesitantly approached the door, peeking through the peephole. It was the police. I let them in, my heart still racing. There were 2 officers. One, a tall man with a kind face, and the other, a shorter woman with sharp, observant eyes. They introduced themselves and immediately began asking questions. I told them everything, from the strange encounter at the mall to the note left at my door. The officers took the note as evidence, carefully placing it in a plastic bag. "Do you have any security cameras around the house?" the female officer asked. I shook my head. "No, I never thought I'd need them. We'll patrol the area tonight and keep an eye out for anything suspicious," the male officer assured me. "In the meantime, if you notice anything unusual, anyone lurking, strange cars parked outside, call us immediately." I nodded, grateful for their presence, but the fear gnawing at my gut didn't subside. Even with the police involved, the stranger felt like a shadow hanging over me, unseen but ever present. After the officers left, Emily stayed with me for the rest of the day. We tried to distract ourselves with movies, but every scene blurred together as my mind kept drifting back to the stranger. The note had been a warning, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was just the beginning. Night fell, and Emily offered to spend the night, but I insisted she go home. I didn't want to drag her any further into this nightmare. I needed to face this on my own, though the very thought terrified me. As soon as she left, the silence in the house became unbearable. Every tick of the clock echoed in the stillness, and every gust of wind outside felt like a whisper of something sinister. I checked the locks one last time, my fingers trembling as I slid the bolt into place. I tried to sleep, but my eyes refused to stay closed for long. The darkness felt alive, pressing in on me, making me feel like I wasn't alone. At some point in the night, exhaustion finally took over, and I drifted off into a fitful sleep. But then, in the dead of night, I heard it, a faint scraping sound at the window. My heart pounded in my chest as I sat up in bed, straining to hear. The noise came again, slow, deliberate, like someone dragging something across the glass. I held my breath, frozen with fear. Was it him? I sat completely still, my body tense with dread. The scraping at the window grew louder, more deliberate, like fingernails clawing against the glass. My breath caught in my throat as I turned my head slowly toward the source of the sound. The curtains were drawn, but I could see a faint outline, a shadow that loomed just outside the window. My heart raced, thundering so loudly in my chest I thought it might give me away. I slid silently out of bed, careful not to make a sound, and grabbed my phone from the nightstand. My fingers trembled as I dialed 911 again. The operator picked up almost immediately. 911. What's your emergency? There's someone outside my window, I whispered, my voice shaking. Please, you have to send someone. I think it's the man who's been following me. Stay calm, the operator said in a soothing voice. Officers are on their way. Stay on the line with me. Are you in a secure location? I nodded, forgetting for a moment that she couldn't see me. I'm in my bedroom, but I don't know how secure it is. He's right outside. Is there a door or another window you can use to exit the room? I glanced around, trying to think. The only other exit was through the hallway, but that meant going past the window past him. My mind raced, struggling to think clearly through the mounting panic. Suddenly, the scraping stopped. Silence fell over the room like a heavy blanket. I held my breath, straining to hear any sign of movement. Was he still there? Or had he gone? The operator's voice pulled me back. Is everything all right? Are you safe? I don't know, I whispered. He stopped. I can't hear him anymore. Stay where you are, she advised. The police are just a few minutes away. Do not engage with him. Just stay hidden. I nodded again, gripping the phone tightly. My eyes darted toward the window, fear gripping my throat like a vice. I could still feel his presence, even if I couldn't see him. The air felt thick with tension, like he was waiting for something, waiting for me to make a mistake. Minutes passed, each one dragging on for an eternity. My knuckles were white from clutching the phone, and my pulse echoed in my ears. Then, the unmistakable sound of footsteps came from the hallway. They were slow, deliberate, and far too heavy to belong to anyone I knew. My heart plummeted as I realized the horrifying truth. He wasn't just outside. He was inside the house. I scrambled backward, pressing myself against the wall as quietly as I could. I had no idea how he'd gotten in, but it didn't matter now. He was here. The operator was still talking, her voice a distant murmur in my ear. But all I could focus on was the sound of those footsteps, growing closer and closer. The doorknob to my bedroom rattled. I stifled a scream, my body shaking with terror. I wanted to run, to flee into the night and never look back, but my legs felt like lead. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I was trapped. Suddenly, there was a loud bang from the front of the house. The footsteps stopped abruptly, and I heard a voice, familiar but authoritative. Police, we're coming in. Relief flooded over me as I realized the officers had arrived. I let out a shaky breath, my whole body trembling as I listened to them sweep through the house. Doors creaked open, footsteps echoed through the hall, and the muffled sound of voices called out to one another as they searched. Finally, The door to my bedroom opened, and I saw the familiar face of the officer from earlier. His eyes scanned the room, and when they landed on me, his expression softened. "Are you all right?" he asked, stepping inside. I nodded weakly, still too shaken to speak. He approached me cautiously, helping me to my feet as I clutched my phone in one hand. "We didn't find anyone inside," he said, his voice calm but serious. "But we did see footprints outside the window. Whoever it was, they're gone now." I swallowed hard, trying to process his words. Gone. He was gone. But for how long? How could I feel safe when he could come back at any time? The officer escorted me to the living room, where another officer was waiting. They stayed with me for a while, reassuring me that they'd continue to patrol the area and investigate the situation further. But the feeling of safety was fleeting. As much as I wanted to believe they could protect me, I knew deep down that this wasn't over. After the officers left, the house felt emptier than ever. I sat on the couch, staring blankly at the front door, half expecting him to appear again. Every creak, every gust of wind set my nerves on edge. And then, just as I thought I might finally fall asleep, my phone buzzed. A single text message from an unknown number. "See you soon." The message on my phone sent a chill down my spine. I stared at the screen, my mind reeling. How'd he get my number? How long had he been watching me? Every ounce of the relief I'd felt moments ago vanished, replaced by a deep, consuming dread. I leaped to my feet, locking every door and window in the house, double-checking each one twice. Even though the police had left only minutes ago, it suddenly felt like they were too far away. The darkness outside felt suffocating, as if the night itself was closing in, trapping me inside my own home. My phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. "You can't run." Panic set in, and I could barely think straight. My hands shook as I tried to block the number, but even that felt useless. Whoever this was, they didn't just want to scare me. They wanted me to know they could get to me whenever they wanted. I dialed 911 again, my fingers fumbling on the screen. 911, what's your emergency? The voice was familiar, the same operator from earlier. He texted me. I blurted out, "He has my phone number. He's still out there." The operator remained calm, but I could hear the concern in her voice. "Stay inside. Do not leave the house. I'm sending officers back to your location right now. Are all doors and windows locked?" "Yes," I whispered, my breath coming in shallow gasps. "But what if he gets in again?" "Stay on the line with me," she said, her voice steady. "The police will be there soon. Don't open the door for anyone but the officers." I tried to focus on her voice, but my mind was spiraling. What if the stranger wasn't outside? What if he was already inside, hiding somewhere in the house? The thought made my stomach churn. The minutes dragged on, each second feeling like an hour. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind outside sent my heart racing. I couldn't sit still. I paced the room, clutching my phone like a lifeline, my eyes darting to the windows and door. And then I heard it, a soft creak, like footsteps coming from the hallway. My blood ran cold. The house was supposed to be empty. I had locked everything. I had checked. Twice. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. There was no answer, just silence. But I could feel it, the presence of someone or something lurking just out of sight. I took a step back, pressing myself against the wall, my heart pounding in my chest. The operator was still on the line, her voice a distant hum in the background as I strained to listen for any sound that could confirm my worst fears. The footsteps started again, slow and deliberate, as if whoever was there knew exactly where I was. The floorboards creaked under their weight, getting closer and closer. I couldn't breathe. The doorknob to the living room turned slowly, the metallic click echoing in the silence. I froze, my body stiff with terror. The door began to open, just a crack, revealing a sliver of the dark hallway beyond. And then, the front door burst open. "Police! Show yourself." The officer's voice was sharp and commanding. Two uniformed men rushed inside, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, sweeping the hallway and every corner of the room. The door to the living room swung open fully, but no one was there. The footsteps had stopped, the air thick with an eerie stillness. One of the officers approached me, his face set in a concerned frown. "Are you all right? Did you see anyone?" I shook my head, my whole body trembling. "I heard someone. They were inside. The door was opening." The officers searched the house again, more thoroughly this time, but found no sign of an intruder. It was as if the person had vanished into thin air. One of the officers stayed with me, while the other stepped outside to examine the property. I sat on the couch, staring blankly at the front door, still in shock from what had just happened. "How did they get my number?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The officer frowned. "We'll look into that. It's possible they hacked your phone or accessed your information somehow, but we'll do everything we can to track them down." I nodded, but the fear gnawing at me didn't ease. Even with the police here, I felt exposed, vulnerable. This stranger, whoever they were, had found a way into my life, and now it felt like there was no escaping them. Minutes later, the second officer returned, his expression grim. "We found something," he said quietly. "A trail of footprints leading away from the back door. It looks like someone's been watching the house for a while." My stomach dropped. "Watching?" I asked, my voice hoarse. He nodded. "The footprints are fresh, but they circle the house. Whoever it was, they've been keeping an eye on you." I felt like I was going to be sick. The reality of the situation was worse than I had imagined. This wasn't just someone trying to scare me. This was someone who had been planning, stalking. "We'll have someone stay outside the house tonight," the first officer assured me. "You're safe for now, but if anything happens, you call us immediately." I nodded again, my mind numb. Safe for now? But for how long? Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents. It began about 2 weeks ago. At first, I didn't think much of it. After all, my street was quiet, mostly filled with families or retirees. It wasn't unusual to see someone walking late at night. But there was something different about this figure, something unsettling. It always happened around the same time, just after midnight. I'd be sitting in the living room, reading or watching TV, when a shadow would pass by my front window. No one else seemed to notice, and it never lingered long. Just a fleeting silhouette, moving slowly, deliberately, almost as if it knew I was watching. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe it was someone from the neighborhood, taking a late-night stroll. But as the nights passed, I couldn't shake the strange feeling that washed over me whenever I saw it. The figure's gait was too slow, too unnatural, as if it wasn't in a hurry to get anywhere. Then, one night, curiosity got the better of me. I was sitting on the couch, the only light coming from the TV, when I saw the figure pass by again. This time, I leapt up from my seat and hurried to the window, peering through the blinds just in time to catch a glimpse. It was tall, unnervingly tall, and dressed in a long, dark coat. I couldn't make out any facial features, but there was something about the way it moved that sent a shiver down my spine. My hand hovered over my phone, debating whether to call the police, but I hesitated. What would I even say? There's someone walking past my window every night. It sounded ridiculous, even to me, but the next night it happened again, and the night after that. By the 5th night, I knew this wasn't normal. This figure, whoever or whatever it was, never changed direction. It never crossed the street or wandered off. It followed the exact same path, at the exact same time, every single night. Always moving past my window, never turning to look inside, but leaving me with the overwhelming feeling that I was being watched. I started staying up later, waiting for the figure to appear. The anticipation gnawed at me, and I began to dread the moment I would see it. I thought about talking to my neighbors, asking if they had noticed anything unusual, but I didn't want to come off as paranoid. But then, something changed. It was a particularly cold night, the kind that chills you to the bone. I had been pacing the living room, too anxious to sit down when I saw the figure again. This time, though, it wasn't walking past. It had stopped, right in front of my window. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest as I stared at the shadowy figure standing still, just a few feet away from me, separated only by a thin pane of glass. It didn't move. It didn't turn. It just stood there, as if waiting for something. Slowly, I reached for the blinds, barely breathing as I carefully pulled them back just enough to peek through. The figure stood motionless, facing the street. But the longer I looked at it, the more wrong it seemed. Its proportions were off. The arms were too long, the body too thin, the posture unnaturally stiff. My eyes scanned the figure, trying to understand what I was seeing, but the dim streetlight cast long shadows, obscuring its features. Suddenly it moved, not forward, not backward, but a slight, jerky motion as if it was adjusting itself. I couldn't tear my eyes away, even though every instinct screamed at me to look away, to shut the blinds, to lock every door. Then, in one horrifying moment, it turned its head, not toward the street, but directly at me. I gasped and stumbled back, dropping the blinds and nearly knocking over the lamp on the table. My hands shook as I clutched the edge of the couch, my breath coming in shallow gasps. It had seen me. For the first time in weeks, the figure had acknowledged my presence, and now it knew I was watching. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed huddled in my room, the door locked, every light in the house turned on. The next morning, I went to the window and looked outside, half expecting to find footprints or some sign that the figure had been real. But there was nothing, no trace of it ever being there. I tried to go about my day, telling myself that it was all in my head, that I was just tired, overworked, stressed. But as nightfall approached, the fear crept back in, gnawing at the edges of my mind. That night, I couldn't bring myself to sit by the window. I stayed in my room, the curtains drawn, refusing to look outside. But deep down, I knew it didn't matter. The figure would be there, walking past my window like it always did. Only now it knew I was watching, and I had no idea what it wanted. The next few nights were unbearable. I had always prided myself on being rational, not easily swayed by superstition or fear. But the figure outside my window was testing my limits. I barely slept, each creak of the house jolting me awake. Every time I passed by a window, I felt compelled to peek outside, certain I'd see that tall, shadowy form again. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that it was probably just some drifter or maybe even a local messing with me. But deep down, I knew there was something more sinister at play. The way it moved, the way it had turned to look at me, it was wrong. On the 7th night, I decided I couldn't keep ignoring it. I needed answers. Just after midnight, I sat in the darkened living room, watching the street. My heart raced in anticipation, my eyes glued to the window. And then, right on time, it appeared. The figure moved with its slow, deliberate pace. But tonight, something was different. It wasn't walking past the house. It was walking toward it. I held my breath, frozen in place as it approached my front door. The porch light flickered as the figure stepped into its glow, revealing more of its unsettling form. The dark coat it wore seemed tattered, almost fraying at the edges, and its face, or rather, the lack of it, sent a shiver of dread down my spine. The face was obscured, as if a shadow clung to it, refusing to reveal its features. It stopped just short of the door. I watched, horrified, as the figure reached out and gently knocked. It wasn't the loud, insistent knock of someone wanting to be let in. No, it was a soft, deliberate tap, as if it was waiting for me to acknowledge it. My mind raced. Should I answer? Call the police? Hide? The knock came again, this time a bit louder. My body trembled with fear, but I found myself moving toward the door, my hand hovering over the knob. What was I doing? This was insane, but some strange pull urged me forward, as if I had no choice but to confront whatever was standing outside. I opened the door just a crack. The figure loomed there, taller than I had imagined, its form dark and distorted in the dim porch light. I could barely make out the outline of its face. My voice caught in my throat, barely a whisper as I asked, "What do you want?" It didn't respond. It didn't move. A chill washed over me, the kind that grips you deep in your bones. I quickly slammed the door shut, locking it with shaking hands, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. For what felt like an eternity, I stood there, waiting, listening, but the figure didn't knock again. I peered through the peephole, expecting it to be standing there, but it was gone. The next morning, I woke feeling exhausted, the night's events playing over and over in my mind. I didn't know who, or what, had come to my door, but I knew it wasn't over. That evening, as the sun set and darkness crept in, I felt the familiar dread return. The figure would come back. I was sure of it. But this time, I wasn't going to wait. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside, determined to figure out what was going on. I followed the path the figure had taken the night before, walking past my house and down the street. The neighborhood was eerily quiet, no signs of life. My footsteps echoed on the pavement as I ventured farther than I had in weeks, my eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of the figure. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. Standing at the far end of the street, almost hidden in the shadows, the figure was watching me. This time, I didn't freeze. I kept walking, my heart pounding as I got closer. The figure didn't move. It simply stood there, waiting for me. When I was just a few feet away, I stopped. The figure loomed over me, its presence oppressive, suffocating. I wanted to speak, to demand answers, but the words wouldn't come. I felt like I was in a nightmare, trapped, unable to wake up. Then, without warning, the figure spoke. Its voice was low, almost a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a knife. "You shouldn't have opened the door." Before I could react, the figure turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. I stood there, trembling, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Why had it spoken to me? What did it want? As I made my way back home, the words echoed in my mind. "You shouldn't have opened the door." I didn't sleep that night, and when morning came, I realized that whatever this figure was, it wasn't finished with me. The following days passed in a haze. Every night, I stayed awake, waiting for the figure to return. My every sense was heightened, every creak and groan of the house making me jump. But the figure never showed up again, at least not outside. Instead, strange things started happening inside my home. At first, it was small, a misplaced object here, an open door there. Things I could rationalize. Maybe I'd forgotten to close the cupboard, or maybe I'd left my keys on the counter instead of the entryway table. But as the days went on, the disturbances grew more deliberate, more unsettling. One evening, as I lay on the couch trying to distract myself with a movie, I heard a soft thud coming from upstairs. My heart skipped a beat, and I muted the television, straining to hear any further sounds. Another thud. It was coming from my bedroom. I grabbed a flashlight from the drawer and crept up the stairs, my hands trembling as I reached the top. The hallway was dark, but I could see the faint glow of light seeping under my bedroom door. That was impossible. I hadn't left any lights on. Swallowing my fear, I pushed open the door. The room was empty, but my bedside lamp was on, casting long shadows across the walls. I hadn't turned it on. The closet door, which I always kept shut, was slightly ajar. I froze. There was a heavy silence in the room, the kind that presses against you, making you feel like you're not alone. Slowly, I approached the closet, my heart racing. With a trembling hand, I yanked the door open. Nothing, just clothes hanging neatly, shoes lined up at the bottom. I let out a shaky breath, feeling a brief wave of relief, until I noticed something unusual. There, at the back of the closet, was a small, folded piece of paper sitting on the floor. It hadn't been there before. I picked it up, my fingers shaking as I unfolded it. The note was handwritten in neat, precise script. For words, inked in black, stared back at me. "You opened the door." My stomach dropped. How did this note get here? Who had written it? Suddenly, a loud crash came from downstairs, followed by the unmistakable sound of glass shattering. I bolted from the room and rushed down the stairs, the flashlight beam bouncing wildly ahead of me. The front window in the living room had been shattered, glass scattered across the floor. But that wasn't the worst part. There, just inside the window, was the figure. It stood perfectly still, its tall, shadowy form framed by the broken glass. This time it wasn't outside passing by. It was inside my home. I stumbled back, barely able to breathe as the figure began to move. Slowly, it turned to face me, and I saw something I hadn't before, a glimpse of its face. What I saw wasn't human. Its skin was unnaturally pale, almost translucent, and its eyes were dark, empty voids. I backed away, my legs threatening to give out as the figure stepped closer. My mind raced, but all I could think about was the warning it had given me. "You shouldn't have opened the door." Suddenly, the figure spoke again, its voice even more chilling than before. "You let me in." I didn't understand. What had I done? My thoughts were jumbled, a mix of confusion and terror. But one thing was clear. Whatever this figure was, it had been waiting for this moment, waiting for me to invite it into my life, my home, and now it was too late. The figure reached out, its long, shadowy fingers inches from my face. I couldn't move, couldn't think. This was it. I was done for. But just as its hand was about to touch me, the figure stopped. It tilted its head, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. Then, without a word, it stepped back, its form retreating into the darkness. Within seconds, it was gone, leaving nothing but shattered glass and a trail of dread in its wake. I collapsed to the floor, my breath coming in ragged gasps. What had just happened? Why had it left? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the horror that had unfolded. The figure had spoken to me. It had warned me. But why? What did it want? As dawn broke, I knew one thing for certain. I needed answers. And I had a feeling that whatever truth lay behind this figure was far more terrifying than I could ever imagine. The morning sun poured through my bedroom window, illuminating the remnants of my shattered night. I sat up slowly, every fiber of my being on high alert. The events of the previous night replayed in my mind like a haunting reel, each frame more disturbing than the last. I needed to understand what was happening to me and why this figure had chosen to invade my life. I grabbed my phone and began searching for any information related to my experiences. As I scrolled through pages of local folklore and urban legends, I stumbled upon a chilling article about spectral sightings in my neighborhood. According to the piece, people had reported encounters with a shadowy figure over the years, a being that appeared at night, lurking near homes and often haunting the dreams of those it visited. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a random ghost story. It was part of something far deeper and darker. My fingers trembled as I searched for more details, hoping for something that might explain the connection between the figure and me. The article mentioned a long-abandoned house at the end of my street. Once a family home, it had been left to decay after the mysterious disappearance of its last residents many years ago. They had vanished without a trace, and locals believed that the family had been involved in strange rituals, hoping to communicate with the other side. With a renewed sense of purpose, I decided to visit the house. I needed to uncover its secrets and discover if there was a connection to the figure haunting me. The sun was setting as I approached the dilapidated structure. The air grew heavy, and the light dimmed as clouds rolled in, casting an ominous shadow over the property. The house loomed before me, its windows broken and doors hanging askew, as if it were a gaping mouth waiting to swallow me whole. Stepping onto the creaky porch, I felt a chill run down my spine. I pushed open the door, which creaked loudly in protest, revealing a darkened hallway that smelled of damp wood and mildew. The walls were lined with peeling wallpaper, and the floorboards groaned beneath my weight. As I moved deeper into the house, I felt a strange energy enveloping me, a mixture of dread and curiosity. I needed to find the source of whatever darkness had settled here. The living room was cluttered with remnants of the past, broken furniture, overturned chairs, and dusty trinkets. I scanned the room, my eyes landing on a small, ornate box tucked away in the corner. It seemed out of place amid the decay, as if someone had deliberately left it behind. I approached the box cautiously, brushing away the dust that clung to its surface. Intrigued, I opened it to find a collection of photographs, faded images of the family that once lived here. Their faces were eerily familiar, but one in particular caught my attention. A young girl with hauntingly dark eyes, her smile unsettlingly wide. As I examined the photos, I felt a sudden rush of cold air, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I turned to find a shadowy figure standing at the entrance of the room, just as it had the night before. Panic surged through me, but I couldn't look away. "You shouldn't be here," it whispered, its voice a chilling echo. "Leave this place." Despite my fear, I stood my ground. "Why are you haunting me? What do you want?" The figure hesitated, its form wavering like smoke. "You opened the door," it repeated, but this time there was a hint of sorrow in its tone. "You must understand, there are things that should remain hidden." Before I could respond, the figure drifted back into the shadows, leaving me alone in the room once more. My heart raced, and a sense of urgency washed over me. Whatever the figure was trying to protect me from, I needed to uncover it. I rifled through the rest of the house, searching for any clues that could explain the family's fate or the entity that haunted me. I found old diaries filled with frantic entries detailing the family's descent into madness, notes about rituals, strange noises, and the appearance of a dark figure that tormented them at night. One entry stood out. "We thought we could control it, but it controls us now. The darkness is alive, and it feeds on our fears." My stomach churned as the realization dawned on me. The figure wasn't just a ghost. It was a manifestation of something far more sinister. Whatever had happened to this family was connected to my own life now. I was being drawn into a cycle of fear, and if I didn't act quickly, I might become another victim of the darkness. As I left the abandoned house, I vowed to learn more about the family, the rituals they performed, and the entity that had been unleashed. I would dig deeper into the town's history, speaking to anyone who might have knowledge of the past. This was no longer just about a haunting, it was about survival. But as I stepped out into the fading light, a sinking feeling settled in my gut. The figure would not let me go easily. It was waiting for me, lurking just out of sight, and it wouldn't stop until it got what it wanted. The air was thick with anticipation as I approached my home, the shadows lengthening like dark fingers stretching across my path. My heart raced with a mixture of dread and determination. I knew I couldn't avoid the truth any longer. I had to confront the figure and the dark history that entwined our fates. That night, I prepared myself for what lay ahead. Armed with the knowledge I had unearthed from the abandoned house, I lit candles around my living room, their flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. I gathered the photographs from the family I had discovered, placing them on a small table as a reminder of the lives that had been lost to the darkness. As the clock struck midnight, a heavy silence descended upon the room. I felt an electric charge in the air, a sign that something was coming. I steeled myself, knowing I would have to face the figure that had haunted my nights. I closed my eyes, focusing on my breathing, letting the tension wash over me as I tried to summon my courage. Moments later, I heard it, a soft knock at my window, just like the nights before. The sound sent chills down my spine, but this time, I wouldn't run. I opened my eyes and turned toward the window, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure appeared, its silhouette framed by the dim light of the street lamp outside. It stood still, as if waiting for me to make the first move. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and approached the window, my mind racing with questions. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice firm despite the fear gnawing at me. "What do you want from me?" The figure moved closer, the air around it crackling with a strange energy. "You must understand," it whispered, its voice now tinged with a sense of urgency. "I am a part of this place, bound by the darkness that was unleashed. It feeds on fear, and I am here to warn you." "Warn me? About what?" I pressed, desperate for answers. "What happened to the family?" "They believed they could control it," the figure replied, its form flickering like a dying flame. "They performed rituals to summon what should never be disturbed. In their arrogance, they opened the door to something ancient and malevolent. It devoured them, one by one, leaving nothing but echoes of their terror." My mind raced as I processed its words. "But why me? I didn't ask for this." "You were drawn here," it said, its voice softening. "You sought the truth, and now you must confront it. You must close the door that they opened before it consumes you too." With each word, a wave of understanding washed over me. The darkness that haunted the abandoned house was the same force now pursuing me. I had to confront it, to close the door that had been opened so long ago. "How?" I demanded, my resolve hardening. "How do I stop it?" The figure hesitated, its form wavering. "You must return to the house, to the site of the ritual. There, you will find the answers. But be warned, the darkness will fight back." With a determined nod, I understood what I had to do. I wouldn't let fear control my life any longer. I would face whatever awaited me in that house, and put an end to the terror once and for all. As the figure began to fade, it whispered, "Remember, You have the strength within you. Trust in yourself." And just like that, it vanished, leaving me alone in the stillness of my living room. I gathered my courage and set out for the abandoned house once more, the weight of its history pressing down on me. The night was darker than before, but I pressed on, the flickering candlelight guiding my path. Upon arriving at the house, the familiar creak of the door sent a shiver through me, but I steeled myself. I stepped inside, the air thick with a sense of foreboding. The living room was just as I had left it, yet the atmosphere felt heavier, as if the darkness was aware of my presence and ready to retaliate. I made my way to the room where I had found the photographs, determined to uncover the truth of the family's fate. The old diaries lay scattered across the floor, their pages whispering secrets of despair. I picked one up, flipping through the entries until I found the final note, an incantation, a desperate plea to the entity they had summoned. As I recited the words aloud, the temperature in the room plummeted, and a cacophony of whispers filled the air. Shadows twisted and coiled around me, pulling me toward the center of the room. Panic surged within me, but I remembered the figure's words. I had the strength within me. "I refuse to be a pawn in your game," I shouted, my voice rising above the chaos. "You will not take me." The shadows recoiled at my defiance, swirling violently around me. I could feel the entity's rage, its desperation to regain control. But I stood my ground, channeling every ounce of strength I had. With a surge of willpower, I shouted the final words of the incantation, and a blinding light erupted from within me, illuminating the room. The shadows writhed in agony as the light engulfed them, the whispers turning to screams of fury. "Your time is over," I declared, my voice ringing with newfound confidence. The darkness began to dissipate, retreating into the corners of the room until it vanished completely, leaving only silence in its wake. Breathing heavily, I stood alone in the now quiet room. I had done it. I had closed the door that had been opened so long ago. The oppressive weight that had hung over me was lifted, and a sense of peace settled in its place. As I stepped outside, I felt a profound sense of relief. The night sky was clear, the stars shining brightly above me. I knew the figure would no longer haunt me, that I had freed myself from its grasp. But as I walked home, I realized that the battle I had faced was just one chapter in a much larger story. The darkness would always be a part of this place, lurking in the shadows, waiting for another opportunity. Yet, I had proven to myself that I was stronger than the fear it wielded. I glanced back at the abandoned house, its silhouette framed against the moonlight, a reminder of the struggle I had faced. I had confronted the darkness and emerged victorious, but I also understood that the journey was far from over. I would carry the lessons I learned into the future, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The light I had discovered within myself would guide me, illuminating the path forward as I embraced the unknown with courage and strength. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon when I first noticed the figure standing at my front door. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the porch, and I was curled up on the couch, lost in a book. The rhythmic sound of my heart faded into the background as I became engrossed in the story, so much so that I nearly missed the soft knock. It was a gentle sound, almost hesitant, but it broke the spell of my reading. I glanced at the clock, 3:15 p.m. Who could it be? I wasn't expecting anyone. With a slight frown, I set my book aside and stood up, the floor creaking beneath my feet as I made my way to the door. Peering through the peephole, I saw a stranger standing there. He was tall, with unkempt hair and a thick coat that seemed a bit too large for his frame. A strange air surrounded him, a mix of warmth and an unsettling aura. I hesitated, my instincts telling me to retreat, yet curiosity pushed me forward. Opening the door just a crack, I kept the chain lock in place. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice steady despite the unease bubbling within me. The stranger looked down, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said, his voice low and calm. "I just moved into the neighborhood, and I wanted to introduce myself. My name is David." I relaxed slightly at his polite demeanor, but there was something about his presence that felt off. Nice to meet you, David. I'm Sarah, I replied, glancing over my shoulder, half expecting someone else to appear behind him. He offered a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I know this is a bit odd, but I've been meaning to meet my neighbors. I thought it would be nice to connect. Sure, I said, still cautious. What brought you to this area? He paused for a moment, as if contemplating his answer. It's peaceful here, just what I needed after everything that happened. There was a hint of something in his voice, a shadow that flickered across his face. But before I could question it further, he continued. I've been unpacking all day. It's a bit overwhelming, you know? I nodded, feeling a mix of empathy and wariness. Moving can be tough. I hope you settle in well. Thank you, he replied, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. I appreciate it. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask. The sincerity in his tone caught me off guard, but it was quickly overshadowed by the nagging feeling that there was more to his story than he let on. Okay, I will, I said, trying to sound polite. Great. He stepped back slightly, as if he could sense my discomfort. I'll let you get back to your day, but I might stop by again soon. Sure, I managed, closing the door a bit more as I ended the conversation. Nice meeting you. As I locked the door and stepped back into the living room, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The encounter was strange but harmless. Yet, a nagging feeling lingered in the back of my mind, a sense that something was off about David. I tried to shake it off, returning to my book, but the words blurred together as I replayed the interaction in my mind. What did he mean by everything that happened? Why did he choose to introduce himself in such an unusual manner? The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze of uncertainty. I glanced out the window now and then, half expecting to see David lurking around, but he never returned. That evening, as night settled over the neighborhood, I felt a strange combination of unease and curiosity. I decided to put my doubts aside. After all, I had been looking forward to meeting new people since I moved here. Maybe it was just my imagination running wild. But as I settled down for bed that night, the memory of David lingered. The way he had looked at me, the shadow in his voice. It all felt like a prelude to something I couldn't quite understand. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of an unsettling journey, one that would unravel the very fabric of my safety and trust in my new home. The days that followed David's unexpected visit passed in a blur of routine. I tried to dismiss the unease I felt, chalking it up to the nerves that often accompany new surroundings. Life resumed as usual, work, errands, and the occasional coffee with friends. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It began subtly. At first, it was just a fleeting sensation, a chill that crept over me when I was alone in the house. I'd glance over my shoulder, half expecting to find someone standing in the shadows. I attributed it to my overactive imagination, fueled by late-night horror movies and the stories I loved to read. But then, the strange occurrences began. One evening, I was settling in for a quiet night, flipping through channels on TV, when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. I paused, turning toward the window. At first, I saw nothing but the darkness of the street outside. Just as I was about to dismiss it, a movement caught my attention. There he was, David. He stood across the street, illuminated by a street lamp, his gaze fixed on my house. My heart raced, confusion and fear intertwining in a tightening knot in my stomach. What was he doing there? I quickly pulled the curtains shut, as if that could shield me from his gaze. I tried to convince myself that I was being ridiculous. Maybe he was just passing by. Perhaps he was lost. But as the days wore on, David's presence became more pronounced. I spotted him at odd hours, lingering near the mailbox or sitting on a bench in the park across from my house. He never approached, never spoke. He just watched. On the third day since our initial meeting, I returned home after a late shift at work, exhausted and ready for bed. As I approached my front door, I noticed something strange. A small envelope slipped under the welcome mat. My heart raced again as I picked it up, the paper feeling oddly cold against my skin. I opened it cautiously. Inside was a note written in neat, deliberate handwriting. I hope you're settling in well. If you need anything, just ask. There was no signature, no indication of who it was from. But the familiarity of the message sent a shiver down my spine. I glanced around, half expecting to see David lurking nearby. But the street was empty. Shaking off the discomfort, I entered my home and locked the door behind me, trying to convince myself that I was overreacting. It was just a note, right? People were friendly in this neighborhood. But as I settled into bed, sleep was elusive. Every creak of the house seemed amplified, every shadow more pronounced. I kept replaying the note in my mind, feeling as though it was a warning disguised as kindness. The next morning, I decided to confront my fears head-on. I grabbed my phone and texted a friend, asking if they'd like to come over for a movie night. I needed the company, a distraction from the unsettling feeling that clung to me like a shadow. Later that evening, I prepared snacks and set up the living room for a cozy night in. My friend, Claire, arrived, bringing a much-needed sense of normalcy with her laughter and chatter. As we settled in with popcorn and drinks, I felt the tension in my shoulders ease. But just as I was starting to relax, a loud knock echoed through the house. My heart jumped into my throat. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, glancing at Claire, who looked equally startled. "I did. It came from the front door," she replied, her voice a mix of curiosity and concern. We exchanged nervous glances before I reluctantly made my way to the door. Peering through the peephole, I was met with an all-too-familiar figure. David stood there, his expression unreadable. "Should I let him in?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Claire frowned. "I don't know, Sarah. Are you sure it's a good idea?" I hesitated, weighing the options. "He's just being friendly, right? I'll just say hi and keep it brief." With a deep breath, I unlatched the door and opened it a crack, keeping the chain in place. "David," I said, forcing a smile, "what brings you here?" His gaze seemed to penetrate through the door, unwavering. "I thought I'd drop by and say hello again. It's good to have neighbors who care about each other." The tone of his voice sent a chill down my spine, but I kept my composure. "That's kind of you, but it's a little late for visits, don't you think?" He tilted his head slightly, a slight smile creeping onto his lips. "I just wanted to check in. I noticed you had a friend over. I hope that's okay." I felt a wave of discomfort wash over me. "Yes, it's fine. Thanks for understanding." He nodded slowly, his smile fading into something more serious. "If you ever feel uncomfortable or need help, you can count on me. I'm just across the street, after all." Before I could respond, he stepped back and turned, walking away without another word. I closed the door, locking it tightly as my heart raced. "What was that about?" Claire asked, her brows furrowing with concern. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice shaking, "but something feels very wrong." We returned to the couch, but the atmosphere had shifted. The movie played on, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying the encounter. It was clear now, David was not just a friendly neighbor. He was someone who thrived on a sense of control, lurking in the shadows of my life. And I had to figure out how to reclaim my sense of safety before it was too late. The unease settled in like an unwelcome guest. Each creak of the house, each flicker of light felt amplified. Claire and I tried to enjoy the movie, but the tension in the room was palpable. I could feel Claire's eyes darting to the window every few minutes, her own anxiety seeping into the air. After the film ended, I turned to her. "I don't think I can stay here alone tonight," I confessed, rubbing my arms as if to ward off the cold that had settled deep in my bones. "Why don't I stay over?" Claire suggested. "We can set up a little sleepover, just in case." I nodded gratefully, relieved at the idea of having company. We prepared a makeshift bed on the living room floor with blankets and pillows, the comfort of familiarity somewhat easing my tension. As we chatted and reminisced, the night wore on, and slowly the feeling of dread began to lift until I heard it again. A knock. It echoed through the stillness of the house, sharp and sudden. My heart dropped, and I froze, staring at Claire. She looked equally alarmed. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. She nodded, her eyes wide. "What do we do?" "Stay quiet," I urged, feeling a surge of adrenaline. We both held our breath, straining to listen. Another knock, more insistent this time, followed by a soft call. "Sarah, are you in there?" It was David's voice, smooth and calm, but it sent a chill down my spine. I glanced toward the window, half expecting to see him standing there, watching. "Don't answer," Claire whispered fiercely, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't just ignore him, I replied, torn between fear and a sense of obligation. What if he's really just checking on me? Sarah, you don't know him. You don't know what he's capable of. Claire's grip on my arm tightened. The knocking continued, rhythmic and unsettling. I saw your lights on, David called again. I just wanted to make sure everything's okay. You know you can trust me. Should we call the police? Claire suggested, her voice trembling slightly. I hesitated. Would they take me seriously? Wouldn't it just sound like a paranoid overreaction? But the thought of David standing outside my door, persistent and unyielding, made my skin crawl. Let's just wait, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Maybe he'll leave. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, the knocking ceaseless. Finally it stopped. Silence engulfed the house, broken only by our ragged breaths. I felt a mixture of relief and anxiety, my heart still racing. After what felt like an eternity, Claire and I gathered the courage to peek out the window. I edged closer, pulling the curtain aside just enough to see. The street was empty. The only light came from the flickering street lamp, casting long shadows across the pavement. Maybe he left? Claire murmured, hope creeping into her voice. Let's not assume anything, I said, still feeling the adrenaline coursing through me. We should stay alert. As the hours dragged on, we kept the lights dimmed and the curtains closed. We talked in hushed tones, attempting to distract ourselves. But sleep eluded us, and every sound outside sent us into a frenzy of anxiety. Around midnight, just when I thought I might finally drift off, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold, whispering. Faint and indistinct, it came from just outside the window. My heart raced as I turned to Claire. Do you hear that? I whispered, panic creeping into my voice. She nodded, eyes wide. It's him. It's David. We both held our breath, listening intently. The whispers grew louder, a chilling melody of murmurs that seemed to weave around the house, wrapping it in an unsettling embrace. Sarah, the whispers called almost sweetly. Let me in. My instinct screamed at me to run, to hide, but I was paralyzed by fear. I could feel Claire's presence beside me, a reassuring warmth in the chaos. What do we do? She breathed, her voice trembling. Call the police, I finally managed to say, my voice steadying as I reached for my phone. I dialed, my fingers shaking, as I tried to keep my voice calm for the operator. Please, someone's outside my house. I think he's been watching me, I said, feeling the weight of my fear spill out into the air. Stay inside and lock all your doors, the operator instructed. Help is on the way. I hung up and turned to Claire, her face pale with worry. They're coming. We just need to stay calm. But as we settled back into silence, the whispers transformed into something darker, almost sinister. Sarah, I'm just trying to help you, David's voice called again, layered with an unsettling sweetness that made my skin crawl. I glanced at Claire, her eyes wide with terror. What does he want? She whispered. I shook my head, unable to answer. The minutes dragged on, each second feeling like an eternity. And then, just when I thought the night couldn't get any worse, the lights in the living room flickered. The shadows danced ominously on the walls, creating a haunting atmosphere. Suddenly, I heard a loud crash from the back of the house. My heart raced. What was that? Claire gasped, clutching my arm tightly. I don't know, I replied, panic rising in my throat. We need to check it out. Before I could think twice, I moved toward the hallway, my heart pounding in my ears. I glanced back at Claire, who looked terrified but determined to follow. As we crept toward the noise, I felt the weight of fear settle on my chest. We reached the kitchen, the door slightly ajar, a thin line of darkness beckoning us forward. Do you think it's him? Claire whispered, her voice trembling. I don't know, I said, trying to suppress the tremor in my voice. But we need to be careful. With a deep breath, I pushed the door open wider. The sight before us sent chills racing down my spine. The window was shattered, shards of glass littering the floor, and the faint outline of a figure slipped into the shadows outside. Call the police again, I whispered urgently, grabbing Claire's arm. She fumbled for her phone, but before she could dial, the whispers returned, now louder and more insistent. Let me in, Sarah. You can't hide from me. I backed away, dragging Claire with me as we retreated to the safety of the living room. We locked the door and huddled together, fear coursing through our veins. Help is coming, I repeated, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. The night stretched on, the whispers echoing through the dark, taunting us. And as we waited for the police, I realized I wasn't just afraid of David. I was terrified of what he might do next, and what secrets he held that could turn my life into a nightmare. The night felt like it was closing in around us. With each passing minute, the whispers intensified, weaving through the house like an unseen thread. Sarah, let me in. David's voice echoed in my mind, filling me with dread. Claire's grip tightened on my arm, her breathing shallow. What if he breaks in? She whispered, glancing at the shattered window with wide eyes. We need to stay calm, I said, though my own heart was racing. Let's just focus on the front door. If he tries to get in, we'll know. Suddenly, we heard a thud from the back of the house, a sound so forceful it rattled the frames of the pictures on the wall. I exchanged a panicked glance with Claire. Did you hear that? She whispered. Yes, I replied, my voice barely audible. We should. Before I could finish, the front door rattled violently. The sound made my blood run cold. David's voice boomed through the wood, no longer the sweet tone of before, but a growl laced with anger. Sarah, open the door. Fear coursed through me like ice. He's going to try to break in. I gasped, stumbling backward. What do we do? We have to find a way out, Claire said, looking desperately for options. We can't just sit here and wait. My mind raced. The back door. We can escape through the kitchen. I took her hand, and together we moved swiftly through the living room, trying to remain quiet as the front door continued to shake under David's force. When we reached the kitchen, I took a deep breath and yanked the door open. A rush of cold air hit us, but there was no time to feel it. I glanced outside. Darkness, the street empty, but a sense of danger lingered in the air. Go, I urged, and we slipped out into the night. The world felt different out here, the shadows deeper, the sounds amplified. I led Claire toward the side of the house, trying to put as much distance between us and the front door as possible. We crouched down, hearts pounding, trying to listen for any signs of David. I think he's still inside, Claire whispered, peeking around the corner. What do we do now? We need to find somewhere safe, I said. Maybe the neighbor's house. They might be able to help us. Just as I finished speaking, the front door slammed open, and David's figure loomed in the doorway, silhouetted against the light of the living room. He looked furious, his expression twisted with a mix of rage and desperation. Sarah, I know you're out there. You can't hide from me. Panic surged through me. Run, I whispered urgently, and we darted toward the back of the house, hoping to find an escape route. As we rounded the corner, I spotted the fence that separated my yard from the neighbors. It looked tall and imposing, but we had no choice. We have to jump it, I said, my voice trembling. Claire hesitated, her eyes darting back to the house. What if he sees us? He's too focused on trying to get in, I said, adrenaline coursing through me. Now, we have to go. We scaled the fence as quickly as we could, my heart racing as I felt the splinters scrape against my palms. Once over, we landed on the other side, hitting the ground hard but managing to stay quiet. Where now? Claire panted, glancing nervously at the house behind us. Let's head to the front door of the neighbors, I urged. We can knock and hope they're home. We crouched low, moving swiftly toward the neighbor's porch, each creak of the floorboards making my heart race. I knocked frantically, my breath catching in my throat. Please, someone answer, I murmured. Seconds felt like hours until finally, the door creaked open. A bleary-eyed man stood there, his expression shifting from confusion to concern as he took in our terrified faces. What's going on? He asked, glancing behind us nervously. Please, we need help, I said, my voice shaking. There's a man. He's trying to get into my house. The man's eyes widened. Come in, quickly. He stepped aside, and we rushed inside, slamming the door behind us. What's your name? He asked, concern etched on his face as he led us to the living room. I'm Sarah, and this is Claire. We lived next door. I could feel the adrenaline begin to ebb, replaced by an overwhelming wave of exhaustion. "Have you called the police?" he asked, looking back toward the door. "Yes, but I don't know if they're here yet," I replied, my voice trembling. He was right behind us. "Lock the door," he instructed, and I quickly moved to do as he said. "Do you know this man?" Claire asked, her voice shaky. "Not really," I admitted, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "He was just my neighbor, someone I thought I could trust." Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the back of the house, making us all jump. The man's eyes widened. "Stay here," he ordered, grabbing a baseball bat from a corner. "Wait," I cried, but he was already moving toward the source of the noise, peeking through the window. I grabbed Claire's arm, panic rising again as the reality of the situation sank in. We were trapped. David was still out there, and now we were in someone else's house, unsure of what would happen next. My heart raced as the man moved toward the back door, ready to confront the danger lurking outside. "Please be careful," I whispered, clutching Claire's hand tightly. Just then, another loud noise resonated through the house, and I felt a surge of dread wash over me. The nightmare was far from over, and we were still caught in its web. The air in the neighbor's house grew tense as we waited, our breaths shallow and hearts pounding. The man, whose name I still didn't know, had stepped toward the back door, but his movements were cautious, almost predatory. I exchanged a worried glance with Claire, who seemed on the verge of tears. "Do you think he'll come in?" Claire whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know," I replied, trying to keep my own fear at bay. "But we can't let him find us here." The sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway, making me jump. The man turned sharply, holding the bat tightly, ready for anything. "Stay behind me," he said firmly, eyes locked on the back door. A heavy silence enveloped the room, stretching out as we waited for the next sound. It felt like time itself had stopped. Then, a slow, deliberate knocking began to resonate against the back door, soft at first, but growing more insistent. "David," I breathed, recognizing that familiar tone. "He's here." The man glanced back at us, concern etched on his face. "Stay quiet," he instructed, moving toward the door. He pressed his ear against it, listening intently. "We can't let him know we're in here." I nodded, but my heart raced. I wanted to bolt for the front door, to escape this nightmare, but I couldn't leave Claire behind. We were in this together. The knocking intensified, punctuated by David's voice, now laced with a twisted urgency. "Sarah, let me in. I just want to talk." "Don't open it," Claire whimpered, her grip tightening on my arm. "I won't," the man assured us, backing away from the door. He gestured for us to move to the living room, away from the source of the noise. As we retreated, I glanced back at the door, a sinking feeling settling in my stomach. David sounded desperate, but beneath that desperation was something darker, a hint of rage that made my skin crawl. Suddenly, the back door slammed open with a deafening bang, startling us all. David stood there, framed in the doorway, his face twisted with anger and something else, something almost feral. "Sarah," he shouted, eyes wild. "You can't hide from me." The neighbor stood his ground, bat raised. "Get out," he commanded, his voice firm and unwavering. David's gaze shifted from me to the man, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Who are you?" he demanded, stepping inside the house, uninvited. "This is none of your business." "I'm making it my business," the neighbor replied, unwavering. "Leave her alone." A tense silence fell between them, the atmosphere electric with confrontation. I felt a mixture of fear and anger swell within me. This was my life David was threatening, my safety that hung in the balance. "David, please," I interjected, stepping forward, trying to appeal to whatever humanity might still reside in him. "Just go home. We can talk about this later." "Talk," David sneered, taking a step closer, his expression darkening. "You think we can talk about what you did to me? You betrayed me." "No, I didn't," I shot back, frustration boiling over. "You're not making any sense." "Stop lying," he yelled, his voice rising in a furious crescendo. "You think I don't know what you've been saying? You think I don't see you with your new friends? You think you can just forget about me?" "David," I cried, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. This isn't the answer. You need help? He stepped toward me, but the neighbor moved between us, bat poised for defense. You need to leave now, he warned, voice steady but laced with tension. Or what? David spat, a manic grin spreading across his face. You think you can stop me? In that moment, everything exploded. David lunged forward, and the neighbor swung the bat, connecting with David's shoulder. The impact echoed through the room, and David stumbled back, rage boiling over. I gasped, watching the scene unfold in horror. Claire clutched my arm, her eyes wide. What do we do? She whispered. Call the police, I shouted, realizing we couldn't handle this alone any longer. We need help. The neighbor backed toward us, keeping David at bay. Do it now, he urged, never taking his eyes off David. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking as I dialed. Please, please, come quick, I pleaded with the dispatcher, my voice frantic. There's a man trying to break in. He's threatening us. As I spoke, David regained his balance, fury burning in his eyes. You think you can protect her? He laughed, a chilling sound. You're all going to regret this. Suddenly, he lunged again, and the neighbor swung the bat once more, this time connecting with David's leg. He fell, cursing, but quickly scrambled to his feet, eyes wild. You can't keep me from her. The doorbell rang, a harsh sound slicing through the chaos. Police! Open up! A voice called from outside. My heart leaped. They're here! I shouted, rushing to the door. But before I could reach it, David charged forward, shoving the neighbor aside. The door flew open, revealing a pair of police officers standing there, guns drawn. Step back, one of them commanded, eyes darting around the room. David froze, caught between the officers and his manic rage. You don't understand, he yelled, waving his arms. She's mine. The officers moved swiftly, surrounding him. Get on the ground, one shouted, and in an instant, David was tackled, face down on the floor. As the situation unfolded, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The nightmare was finally coming to an end, but the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. I had been trapped in a web of David's obsession, and now I stood on the brink of reclaiming my life. I turned to Claire, who was still shaking, and we embraced tightly, tears streaming down our faces. It's over, I whispered, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I believed it. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents. It started as a whisper, a fleeting movement at the edge of my vision. I had just moved into my new apartment, excited to begin this chapter of my life. The walls were bare, the air still held the smell of fresh paint, and the sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting warm patterns across the hardwood floor. But something was off. I often felt as if I was being watched, especially in the late hours when the world outside settled into silence. I brushed it off as nerves. New places have a way of making anyone feel uneasy. Still, the feeling lingered, especially in the corners of my room. One night, after a long day of unpacking, I collapsed into bed exhausted. The darkness enveloped me, and as I closed my eyes, I tried to push away the unsettling sensations that had been creeping in. Just as I began to drift into sleep, I felt it. A shiver ran down my spine, and I opened my eyes. In the dim light, I saw it. A shadow, darker than the surrounding darkness, flickering in the corner of my room. I squinted, convinced it was just my imagination, but it seemed to pulse with a life of its own. I sat up, heart racing. Hello, I called out, my voice echoing in the silence. No response. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. The shadow was gone, but the unease remained. I told myself it was just the new surroundings playing tricks on me. I pulled the covers up to my chin and forced myself to sleep, but as I drifted off, I could feel the weight of those shadows pressing in on me. The next few nights followed a similar pattern. I would settle into bed, exhausted, only to be jolted awake by the unsettling sensation of being watched. Each time, the shadow would appear, lingering just out of reach in the corner, always evading my attempts to confront it. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just a trick of the light, or perhaps my overactive imagination conjured up the darkness. But as the days turned into weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was there, lurking just beyond my sight. One particularly restless night, I decided enough was enough. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, determined to confront whatever was hiding in the shadows. The beam of light pierced the darkness, illuminating the corner of the room. At first, there was nothing, just the bare wall and the flickering light bulb casting shadows. But then, as I turned the light, I caught a glimpse of it again, a dark figure, more defined this time. It was almost humanoid, but its features were indistinct, blending into the shadows. I gasped, stumbling back. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to sound braver than I felt. The figure shifted, almost like it was responding to my voice, but it remained silent, an enigma in the darkness. Panic surged through me. I turned off the light and stumbled back into bed, pulling the covers over my head, my heart racing. I could still feel it there, watching, waiting. I couldn't sleep. I lay in the darkness, straining to hear any sound that might indicate it was gone. As the night dragged on, I thought of calling someone, anyone to come stay with me. But what would I even say? Hey, there's a shadow in my room. They'd think I was losing my mind. Finally, exhaustion overcame my fear, and I drifted into a fitful sleep, the darkness pressing in around me. I hoped that when morning came, the shadow would vanish with the night, and I could finally feel safe in my new home. But as the first light of dawn crept through the window, I awoke with a start, the memory of the shadow fresh in my mind. I peered into the corner of the room, half expecting to see it waiting for me. Instead, there was nothing, just the mundane quiet of morning. Maybe it was just a dream, I thought. I had to convince myself of that. I got up, shook off the lingering unease, and began my day. But in the back of my mind, the question remained, what had I truly seen? Little did I know, the shadows were just beginning to reveal their secrets. As days turned into weeks, I began to settle into my new routine. The shadow in the corner of my room became a distant memory, something I chalked up to an overactive imagination and the stress of moving. I filled my apartment with vibrant colors and comforting scents, trying to make it a home. But no matter how hard I tried, the feeling of being watched lingered, a ghostly echo in the back of my mind. One evening, I invited a few friends over for dinner. Laughter filled the space, and for a moment, I felt free from the oppressive unease that had clung to me. As we shared stories and indulged in good food, I allowed myself to forget about the shadows. But as the night wore on and the laughter faded, I found myself glancing at the corner of the room. Just then, my friend Sarah, noticing my distraction, asked, "What's up? You look like you've seen a ghost." I chuckled, trying to brush it off. Just the old house settling, I think. You know how it is. But deep down, I felt a pang of guilt for not sharing the truth. What would they think if I told them? Would they laugh? Dismiss my fears as mere paranoia? I kept the shadow a secret, hoping it would fade away with the night. Later that night, after my friends had left, I was washing the dishes when I noticed something strange. The lights in my kitchen flickered, casting eerie shadows across the walls. I paused, wiping my hands on a towel. I had grown accustomed to the strange flickering, but tonight it felt different, more deliberate. The atmosphere thickened, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I glanced toward the living room, half expecting to see the shadow lurking again. But it was gone. Instead, a sense of dread settled over me, heavy and unyielding. Suddenly, I heard it, a faint tapping sound like someone gently rapping their knuckles against the wall. My heart raced, and I strained to listen, half expecting it to be a trick of the wind. But the tapping continued, rhythmic and persistent. It was coming from the corner of the room. Taking a deep breath, I set the dish down and slowly approached. With each step, the tapping grew louder, more insistent, as if urging me to come closer. I hesitated, but a strange compulsion pulled me forward. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, illuminating the area. There was again the shadow. This time, it seemed to stretch and morph, as if beckoning me. I felt an odd mix of fear and curiosity wash over me. "What do you want?" I whispered, my voice trembling. For a moment, silence enveloped the room. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the tapping stopped. The shadow faded, leaving only a lingering darkness that seemed to absorb the light around it. I stumbled back, the fear flooding through me like ice water. I needed answers. I couldn't let this unknown presence control my life. The next day, I decided to visit the local library, hoping to find information about the history of the building and its previous occupants. The library was a quiet sanctuary, filled with rows of books that smelled of must and old paper. I asked the librarian about my building, and her eyes narrowed as she recalled a few details. "Ah yes, that place has quite the reputation," she said, leaning closer. "Years ago, a family lived there, a mother and her children. They disappeared without a trace. No one ever knew what happened to them." My heart raced as she spoke. "But why?" I asked, desperate for more information. "What do you mean they disappeared?" She shook her head, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Rumors say the mother had gone mad. The children were often heard crying at night, but then one day, they were just gone. Some say they still linger in the house." A chill crept up my spine as the librarian handed me an old newspaper clipping. It was yellowed and faded, the headline reading, "Family vanishes, leaving no clue." I took the clipping home, my mind racing. Was it possible that the shadow I saw was connected to the family? Did their spirits linger, trapped in a place where they once felt safe? That night, I prepared myself for the confrontation I had avoided for too long. With the newspaper clipping in hand, I sat in the center of my living room, turning off the lights. I needed to face the shadow, to understand its connection to the haunting history of my apartment. As darkness enveloped me, I could feel the air thicken, the shadows creeping closer. I steadied my breath, holding the clipping tightly. "I know you're here," I called out, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at my insides. "I want to understand. What happened to you?" Silence answered me, but then, from the corner of the room, I felt a cold breeze, an unmistakable presence. The shadow began to shift, swirling in the darkness. The tapping resumed, echoing softly in the stillness. "I'm listening," I urged, trying to keep my fear at bay. "Please show me." The tapping grew more intense, a pattern forming. It felt like a message, a desperate plea reaching out from the past. I focused on the sound, allowing it to guide me. As I did, the shadow morphed, taking on a shape that seemed almost human, its features obscured but undeniably there. Suddenly, I understood. The shadow wasn't just a manifestation of fear. It was a remnant of the past, an echo of the life that once thrived in my home. It was a reminder of loss, of tragedy that had seeped into the very walls around me. With that realization, I felt a shift within me. I wasn't just an intruder in this space. I was a part of its story, and perhaps I could help. I closed my eyes, allowing the weight of the past to wash over me. "I won't forget you," I whispered. "I'll help you find peace." As I spoke those words, the shadow flickered and began to fade, its presence becoming lighter. It was a beginning, a step toward understanding the haunting legacy that bound us together. But in my heart, I knew that this was only the start of a deeper journey into the shadows that still held their secrets. The next morning, I awoke with a sense of purpose. The encounter with the shadow had stirred something deep within me, a desire to uncover the truth about the family who had vanished. I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadow had wanted to communicate, to share its story. I needed to delve deeper into the history of my home and the lives it had once sheltered. After breakfast, I returned to the library, armed with determination. This time, I asked the librarian for any records or books that might detail the events surrounding the family's disappearance. She directed me to a dusty corner filled with old archives, newspapers, and journals that chronicled the town's history. As I sifted through the brittle pages, a sense of dread settled over me. The more I read, the clearer the tragedy became. The family, Margaret, the mother, and her two children, Lily and Ben, had been well liked in the community. Neighbors recalled laughter and the sound of children playing. But the joy turned to silence when the family abruptly vanished one autumn evening. According to the articles, a search had ensued, but no traces were ever found. Rumors swirled. Some claimed that Margaret had gone mad, haunted by the voices of her children, while others whispered of darker forces at play. A few even suggested that the house itself was cursed, drawing in those who dared to live there. One article caught my eye. It described a local historian, Mr. Grayson, who had dedicated years to researching the family. His obsession with their story had led him to interview neighbors and scour public records, piecing together fragments of their lives. He had become somewhat of a recluse, often seen wandering the town with a notebook in hand. I decided to find Mr. Grayson, hoping he could shed light on the mysterious fate of the family. After asking around, I learned he lived in a small house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by overgrown weeds and forgotten artifacts of the past. When I arrived at his home, I was met with an unsettling atmosphere. The porch creaked under my weight, and the windows were clouded with dust. I knocked hesitantly, feeling an odd mix of anticipation and apprehension. After a moment, the door creaked open, revealing an elderly man with wild, graying hair and piercing blue eyes. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice hoarse but sharp. "What do you want?" "I'm looking for information about the family that lived in my apartment, the ones who disappeared," I replied, trying to keep my tone steady. "I've heard you know their story." His expression shifted, a flicker of recognition passing over his face. "Come in," he said, stepping aside to let me enter. The inside of his home was cluttered with stacks of papers, books, and faded photographs. I could feel the weight of history pressing down on me as I sat across from him at a rickety table. "I've spent years trying to uncover the truth," he said, his eyes narrowing. "But the deeper I dug, the more elusive it became." "What did you find?" I asked, eager for any clue that might explain the family's fate. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Margaret was a loving mother, but there were whispers about her mental state. Neighbors reported hearing her arguing with someone late at night. Then one night it all changed. The children stopped playing, and the laughter turned to silence." As he spoke, I felt a chill creep down my spine. "But what happened to them?" I pressed. "There were rumors of a hidden room in the house," he continued, his gaze piercing mine. "Some believed it was a place where Margaret could trap her fears. Others thought it held something far darker." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart racing. "People said that if you listened closely, you could hear the children crying from within the walls," he said, his voice trembling. I tried to find the room, but it eluded me, much like the family itself. My mind raced. The idea of a hidden room in my apartment made sense. Was it possible that the shadow I had encountered was connected to this? A part of the family trapped between worlds? "I need to find this room," I said, determination filling me. "Do you have any idea where it might be?" Mr. Grayson shook his head. "The original layout of the house has changed over the years. But if it exists, it might be behind a wall or a false bookcase. You must tread carefully. Sometimes, what's hidden should remain that way." As I left his home, my mind buzzed with possibilities. I had to investigate further. The more I uncovered, the more I felt that the shadow was waiting for me to help it find peace. That night, armed with a flashlight and my growing resolve, I returned to my apartment. The moment I stepped inside, the air felt charged, thick with anticipation. I made my way to the living room, scanning the walls for any signs of a hidden door. I traced my fingers along the edges of the bookcase, feeling for any unevenness that might reveal a secret. As I pulled a few books off the shelf, something caught my eye, a slight gap between two shelves. My heart raced as I pressed against it, and to my surprise, the bookcase creaked open, revealing a narrow passageway behind it. With my flashlight in hand, I stepped inside, the darkness swallowing me whole. The air was stale, heavy with dust and neglect. As I ventured deeper, I felt the weight of history pressing down, urging me to uncover what lay hidden. In the dim light, I spotted a door at the end of the passage, slightly ajar. My pulse quickened as I approached, dread and curiosity battling within me. What would I find behind that door? I hesitated for a moment, then pushed it open. The hinges groaned in protest, revealing a small, dimly lit room. The walls were lined with faded wallpaper, and in the center stood a child's toy chest, covered in dust. As I stepped inside, the air felt charged, heavy with an unsettling energy. I opened the chest, and my breath caught in my throat. Inside lay a collection of toys, tattered dolls, a worn teddy bear, and a few crumpled drawings. Each item was a piece of the past, a fragment of the lives that had once thrived here. As I sifted through the toys, I suddenly heard a soft whisper, a voice that echoed in the silence. "Help us!" I froze, the hair on the back of my neck standing on end. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. The shadows in the room seemed to shift, swirling around me, and I felt a chilling presence. The voice returned, more insistent this time. "Help us find us." I took a deep breath, the weight of their plea settling in my heart. I understood now. The family was trapped, their souls longing for release. I had to find a way to help them, to bring their story to light and give them the peace they so desperately sought. But first, I needed to uncover the truth about their disappearance, to piece together the fragments that had been lost in the shadows for so long. I was no longer just an observer. I was part of their story, and it was time to bring it to an end. The whispered plea lingered in my mind as I left the hidden room, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. I knew now that I had to delve deeper into the history of the family, uncovering every detail that had been lost to time. I needed to understand what had driven them to vanish, and how I could help them find peace. The next day, I visited the local archives again, searching for any additional records or clues. I became consumed by the task, poring over old newspaper articles and public records. I learned that Margaret had been a vibrant woman before her family disappeared, known for her warmth and kindness. Yet as time passed, the whispers of her supposed madness grew louder, tarnishing her memory. In one article, I found a mention of a neighbor who had claimed to hear strange noises coming from the house late at night, sounds of children crying and arguments echoing through the walls. The neighbor had tried to intervene, but when she knocked on the door, she was met with silence. The last time anyone had seen the family was during a community gathering the night before they vanished. Armed with this information, I decided to seek out the neighbor. After some inquiry, I discovered that she had moved to a nursing home on the outskirts of town. The drive was long and filled with trepidation, but I felt a growing urgency to piece together the family's story. When I arrived at the nursing home, the air was thick with the scent of aging wood and the faint hum of distant conversations. I approached the receptionist, who directed me to a small common room where the elderly residents gathered. There, among a group of women playing cards, sat the woman I was looking for. Her silver hair was pulled back in a bun, and her hands trembled slightly as she shuffled the cards. I introduced myself, explaining that I was researching the family who had lived in my apartment. Her eyes, sharp and bright despite her age, widened with recognition. "Ah, the McAllisters," she said softly. "Such a tragedy. I still remember that night vividly." I pulled up a chair and listened intently as she recounted her memories. Margaret was a good mother, but something changed in her. The children, they were always so happy playing in the yard. But as the summer turned to fall, I noticed a shift. She started to talk to herself, and I'd hear her arguing with someone in the house. "What do you mean?" I pressed, leaning closer. "Did she mention anyone?" The woman's face darkened. "No one specific. Just voices. Angry, desperate." I tried to reach out, but she wouldn't answer the door. Then one day, they were just gone. No goodbyes, nothing. "Did you see anything unusual that night?" I asked, my heart racing. She frowned, deep in thought. "There was a storm. Lightning flashed, and I thought I saw someone standing outside their window, watching. But when I looked again, no one was there." It sent chills down my spine. "Do you think it could have been someone connected to them?" I inquired, trying to piece the puzzle together. "It's possible," she murmured. "Some said it was a spirit, trying to reach them. Others thought it might have been someone from the past, returning for revenge. But I never believed in such things until that night." I thanked her for sharing her memories and left the nursing home, feeling a weight in my chest. There was so much more to uncover. The notion of a mysterious figure watching the family sent chills down my spine. Who had been standing there, and why? That evening, I returned to my apartment, determined to investigate the windows for any signs of the mysterious watcher. I stood by the living room window, peering out into the darkness, hoping to catch a glimpse of something, anything, that could shed light on the shadowy figure from the past. As I gazed out into the street, the chill of the night wrapped around me. The only sounds were the distant rustle of leaves and the occasional howl of the wind. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I refused to back away from the window. Suddenly, I saw it, a dark figure standing at the edge of the street, partially obscured by the shadows of the trees. My heart raced. Could it be the same figure the neighbor had described? I strained to see more, but the figure remained motionless, a specter lurking in the night. "Who are you?" I called out, my voice breaking the silence. The figure didn't move, didn't respond. I felt a mixture of fear and curiosity compelling me to confront it. I grabbed my flashlight and opened the door, stepping out into the cool night air. The figure remained still, shrouded in darkness, and I took a cautious step closer. "Please show yourself," I urged, my voice steady despite the fear gripping me. As I neared, the figure shifted slightly, revealing a hint of a face illuminated by the glow of my flashlight. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized the familiar features: soft eyes, a sad smile. It was the ghostly visage of a child, a girl with long, dark hair. "Lily," I whispered, realizing I was staring at the spirit of one of the missing children. "Help us," she murmured, her voice soft and ethereal. "You have to find our mother." Panic surged through me. "How? Where is she?" "Beneath the house," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "You must look." Before I could ask more, the figure dissolved into the shadows, leaving me trembling in the darkness. I stood there for a moment, grappling with the reality of what I had just witnessed. I had to find out what lay beneath my apartment. The revelation consumed me as I returned inside, my mind racing. The hidden room, the toys, the whispering plea, it all pointed to something buried beneath the very foundations of my home. I needed to act quickly before whatever dark force was at play swallowed the truth whole. Determined, I began searching for any clues about the layout of the house and its hidden history. If there was a way to access whatever lay beneath, I was going to find it. The morning sun cast a warm glow over the neighborhood, but I felt only cold dread as I scoured the apartment for clues. I returned to the hidden room, hoping it would reveal more about the McAllister family and the secrets lurking beneath my feet. The air was thick with dust and echoes of the past, as if the walls themselves held their breath. I knelt by the toy chest, rummaging through the remnants of childhood, dolls with missing limbs, a cracked jack-in-the-box, and a collection of dusty books. One book caught my eye. It was an old journal, its leather cover worn and faded. I opened it carefully, and the scent of aged paper wafted up to greet me. The journal belonged to Margaret McAllister. As I flipped through its pages, I discovered entries that revealed her gradual descent into despair. She wrote about her children's laughter turning to silence, about voices echoing through the halls, and about her growing sense of isolation. Each entry was filled with a mix of hope and dread, and the last few pages were hastily scribbled, as if she had been racing against time. The whispers grow louder. One entry read, "They say I must hide the children. I can't let them take them away. I have to protect them, even if it means sealing them away forever." A chill ran down my spine as I processed her words. What had she hidden? What did she mean by taking them away? The thought of something sinister lurking beneath my apartment filled me with urgency. I needed to dig deeper. I remembered the old floor plan I had found in the archives, which showed a small cellar beneath the house. It seemed accessible from the back of the apartment. After gathering my courage, I made my way to the kitchen, where I hoped to find the entrance. I carefully pushed aside the old fridge, revealing a trapdoor that had long been forgotten. With a deep breath, I opened the trapdoor and peered down into the darkness. A rickety ladder led into an inky blackness that seemed to breathe with an unsettling life of its own. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed down, the wood creaking under my weight. The basement was damp and musty, the air thick with the scent of decay. I shone my flashlight around, revealing crumbling walls and old boxes filled with forgotten relics. I stepped cautiously, my heart racing as I felt a strange presence enveloping me. As I explored deeper, I came across a wall that seemed newer than the rest, plastered over with a thick layer of dust. Something told me this was no ordinary wall. I ran my fingers along its surface, searching for any sign of a hidden entrance. Then I felt it, a faint indentation, almost like a latch. With a quick motion, I pressed it, and to my surprise, the wall shifted, revealing a small, dark room behind it. My heart raced as I stepped inside, shining my flashlight around. The room was small, cluttered with items that seemed to belong to the McAllister children: crumpled drawings, dusty toys, and a faded blanket. In the corner stood a small, ornate chest, locked tight. It emanated a sense of foreboding, as if it contained the very essence of their spirits. I felt drawn to it, my hands trembling as I searched for a way to open it. I remembered the key I had found in the hidden room. Rushing back, I retrieved it, my pulse quickening with each step. Returning to the chest, I inserted the key, feeling a sense of anticipation mixed with dread. With a turn of the key, the lock clicked open, and I lifted the lid. Inside lay a collection of photographs, old and yellowed, depicting the McAllister family. Smiling faces, laughter frozen in time. But one photograph caught my eye. It showed a family portrait, with a shadowy figure lurking behind them, its features indistinct and haunting. Beneath the photos was a journal. This one belonged to Lily, the little girl who had appeared to me. I opened it, my breath hitching as I read her innocent handwriting. Her entries spoke of the fear that had crept into their home, of the whispers that had stolen their joy, and the man in the shadows who had watched them. They said he would take us away. One entry read, "But Mommy says we have to stay quiet and hide. I don't want to disappear." Tears welled in my eyes as I realized the depth of their fear. This was more than a tragic family story. It was a warning, a plea for help from souls trapped in despair. Suddenly, the room grew cold, and a shadow flickered in my peripheral vision. I spun around, my heart racing. The shadows were moving, coiling around me like tendrils, whispering a language I couldn't comprehend. Panic surged through me as I realized the presence of something sinister was drawing closer. "Help us," the whisper echoed in my mind, stronger now, resonating with the voices of the children. I knew I had to act quickly. The only way to free them from their torment was to confront whatever had taken hold of their family. I gathered the photographs and journal, determined to return to the surface. As I climbed back up the ladder, the shadows swirled around me, trying to pull me down, to keep me in their grip. But I fought against it, my resolve hardening with each step. Bursting out of the trapdoor, I slammed it shut behind me and leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. I realized I needed to perform a ritual to cleanse the space and release the trapped spirits. Armed with their stories, I would not let their cries go unanswered. I gathered supplies, candles, salt, and herbs from my kitchen. With trembling hands, I set up a circle in the living room, placing the photographs and Lily's journal at the center. I lit the candles, watching the flames flicker and dance, illuminating the room with a warm glow. As I began to chant softly, I felt the air grow thick once more, and the whispers returned, swirling around me. The shadows gathered, pressing against the circle. "Help us," they pleaded, and I focused on their words, channeling my energy into the space. The temperature dropped, and I felt a presence looming. The man in the shadows was there, angry and vengeful, his eyes glinting in the candlelight. But I wouldn't back down. I continued to chant, pouring every ounce of my will into freeing the lost souls. With a sudden gust of wind, the candles flickered violently, and I felt a powerful surge of energy. The shadows writhed, and the air crackled with tension. I shouted the final words of the incantation, summoning light to break the darkness. A blinding flash erupted in the room, and the shadows screamed in unison, dissipating into the air like smoke. I felt an overwhelming sense of release as the whispers faded, leaving only a serene silence behind. Panting, I collapsed to the floor, the weight of the moment crashing over me. I had faced the darkness and freed the souls of the McAllister family. As I sat there, the air felt lighter, filled with a sense of peace. I knew they were finally free, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had merely scratched the surface of something much deeper. The lingering sense of dread remained, a reminder that the shadows could return. I would have to remain vigilant, for I had opened a door to a world beyond my own, and I couldn't be sure it would stay closed forever. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents. The heavy scent of dust filled the air as I entered my grandfather's old study for the first time since his passing. It was a room frozen in time, with shelves overflowing with books and an antique desk cluttered with yellowed papers. Memories flooded back, his warm smile, the stories he used to tell, and the way his eyes would twinkle when he spoke of his adventures. As I rummaged through his belongings, I felt a mix of sadness and nostalgia. Among the trinkets and books, one object caught my eye, a locked diary, tucked away on the far side of the desk. The leather cover was worn, its brass lock glinting in the dim light. I had never seen this diary before, and curiosity piqued my interest. What secrets could it hold? I glanced around, half expecting my grandfather to appear, chuckling at my interest in something so mysterious. But he was gone, and this diary felt like a final puzzle he had left for me to solve. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands, feeling the weight of its significance. The lock had no key, and I considered whether I should force it open. But a nagging thought stopped me. What if the contents were meant to stay hidden? My grandfather had always been a private man, guarding his past fiercely. The more I thought about it, the more determined I became to uncover its secrets. I spent the next few days trying to find a way to open the diary. I tried every key in the house, rummaged through old drawers, and even searched online for lockpicking techniques. Nothing worked. Frustration grew, and I began to wonder if I should simply leave it alone. But then, while organizing some of his old papers, I stumbled upon a crumpled note. It was a grocery list, but on the back was a series of numbers that made little sense at first. However, my heart raced as I realized they resembled a combination. Could this be the key to the diary? With renewed hope, I returned to the diary, heart pounding as I began to input the numbers. One by one, I turned the dial, holding my breath with each click. When I reached the final number, I felt a slight give. The lock clicked open, and the moment the diary creaked open, I felt an electric thrill run through me. The first page was filled with my grandfather's neat handwriting. As I began to read, I was immediately drawn into his world. He wrote about his childhood, his dreams, and his travels. But as I turned the pages, the tone shifted. He began to speak of darker things, mysteries that had haunted him, encounters with strange people, and events that made him question reality. I felt a chill run down my spine as I read about a mysterious figure from his past, someone he had encountered during his travels. He described this person as having an unsettling presence, a sense of foreboding that seemed to follow him everywhere. My grandfather had been determined to uncover the truth about this figure, but his writings trailed off into vague notes, hinting at a discovery he had made but never fully articulated. Curiosity turned to unease as I realized that the more I read, the more questions I had. Who was this figure? What had my grandfather discovered? And why had he chosen to lock these revelations away? The entries grew increasingly erratic. He wrote about strange dreams, whispers in the night, and a sense of being watched. My heart raced as I wondered if whatever had haunted him had also come for me. The shadows in my room felt darker. The corners seemed to whisper secrets I couldn't comprehend. Determined to understand what my grandfather had experienced, I continued to read, desperate to unravel the mystery. The final entry was a hurried scrawl, a stark contrast to the neat handwriting I had seen before. It warned of danger and implored me to stay away from the locked door in the basement of our family home, where he claimed the truth lay buried. The mention of a locked door sent a thrill of fear through me. I knew there was a basement beneath the house, but I had never explored it. The idea of venturing down there, especially after my grandfather's warning, filled me with dread. But I couldn't ignore the call of the unknown. I closed the diary, heart racing as I weighed my options. I could choose to forget what I had read and leave the past buried, but I knew myself well enough to understand that the pull of curiosity would be too strong. I had to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The next morning, with the diary clutched tightly in my hands, I headed for the basement door. The house creaked around me, as if sensing my resolve. Each step felt heavier, the air thicker with anticipation. When I reached the door, I hesitated, recalling my grandfather's warnings. But I couldn't turn back now. I pushed the door open, revealing a set of stairs that descended into darkness. A chill raced through me, but I took a deep breath and stepped inside, determined to face whatever awaited me below. The air in the basement was stale, tinged with the scent of damp earth and old wood. As I descended the creaking stairs, the dim light from above faded, swallowed by the shadows that clung to the walls. Each step echoed ominously, amplifying the pounding of my heart. I gripped the railing tightly, half expecting something to reach out from the darkness. At the bottom of the stairs, I hesitated, scanning the small, cluttered space. Cobwebs hung from the beams above, and boxes lay stacked haphazardly, remnants of a life once lived. My grandfather had stored so much down here, treasures and trinkets that had been forgotten over time. But my focus was drawn to the far wall, where an imposing door stood, a heavy, wooden structure that seemed to absorb the light around it. Remembering the diary's warning, a wave of unease washed over me. What lay behind that door? I could feel its presence like a weight pressing against my chest. Yet, the urge to uncover the truth pushed me forward. I had to know what my grandfather had discovered. As I approached the door, I noticed an old lock that looked as if it hadn't been used in decades. I knelt down to examine it, running my fingers over the dust-covered surface. The key my grandfather had left me might fit, but I felt an instinctual reluctance to force it open. This was no ordinary door. It held the secrets of a past that had been buried for a reason. Taking a deep breath, I pulled the key from my pocket, the cool metal feeling heavy in my hand. My thoughts raced back to the diary and my grandfather's urgent scrawls. I inserted the key into the lock, feeling it click into place with a satisfying turn. My heart raced as I turned the handle, the door creaking open to reveal a darkness that seemed to pulse with energy. Inside, the air was even cooler, and a faint, musty smell assaulted my senses. I stepped through the doorway, bracing myself against the chill that enveloped me. The dim light from a single bulb overhead flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. The room was small and cramped, filled with old furniture draped in dusty sheets. A large trunk sat against one wall, and next to it, a table covered with yellowed papers and photographs. I felt drawn to the table, the mystery of its contents pulling me closer. As I reached for the papers, a sudden rustling sound made me freeze. I turned, my heart racing. Had I heard something? The silence that followed was deafening, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. I took a tentative step back, scanning the room for any sign of movement. The shadows seemed to shift, and I could have sworn I saw a figure lurking at the edge of my vision. "Hello," I called out, my voice barely breaking the stillness. No answer, just the sound of my own breathing, rapid and shallow. Steeling my nerves, I turned back to the table and began sifting through the papers. Most were mundane, old receipts and letters. But then I found something that made my blood run cold. A photograph of a woman standing in front of the very house I was in, taken many years ago. She looked directly at the camera, her eyes wide and haunting, as if she were aware of something sinister lurking just out of sight. I flipped the photo over, and my breath caught in my throat. Written in my grandfather's handwriting was a single word, she. Below it, a date, 30 years ago. Questions swirled in my mind. Who was this woman? Why had my grandfather kept this photo? What did he know that had compelled him to lock away the secrets of this room? I continued to dig through the papers, uncovering more photographs, each one depicting the same woman, now in various locations around town. There were notes scribbled on the back, cryptic phrases like "the Watcher," "always nearby," and "not what she seems." A chill ran down my spine as I recalled the shadows I had felt watching me at night, the unease that had settled in my gut since my grandfather's passing. Had he encountered this woman? Was she the reason for the eerie warnings in his diary? Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the far end of the basement, jolting me from my thoughts. I spun around, heart pounding. The door I had just come through slammed shut, and the light flickered ominously before going out completely, plunging the room into darkness. I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam of light cut through the shadows, revealing the furniture and the trunk, but the door was firmly shut. Panic surged within me. I was trapped, My pulse raced as I pressed against the door, pulling and pushing, but it wouldn't budge. Taking a deep breath to calm my racing heart, I turned back to the room, determined not to let fear take over. If I was stuck, I might as well continue my search for answers. I moved toward the trunk, feeling the urgency to uncover whatever secrets it held. With trembling hands, I unlatched the trunk and lifted the lid, which creaked open, revealing its contents: a collection of old clothes, some dusty toys, and at the very bottom, a bundle wrapped in faded cloth. I pulled it out and carefully unwrapped it, revealing a small, ornate box. The box was beautifully crafted, adorned with intricate carvings that seemed almost alive in the flickering light. As I opened it, I was met with a shocking sight: a collection of letters, each addressed to my grandfather, but never sent. The words scrawled on the pages were frantic, filled with desperation and fear. My heart sank as I began to read. The letters spoke of a woman who had been watching from afar, someone who had been part of a sinister plot that entwined my grandfather and his family. The last letter, written just days before his death, contained a chilling warning: "If you find this, do not trust her. She is not who she seems." The realization crashed over me like a wave. My grandfather had been trying to protect me from something, and now that I was in this dark room, I felt the weight of his warning settle heavily on my shoulders. As I stood there, clutching the letters, I heard a soft whisper echo through the darkness. It was faint, but unmistakable, like a distant voice calling my name. I turned quickly, the flashlight beam shaking as I pointed it toward the sound. My breath caught in my throat. "Who's there?" I shouted, the fear rising within me. The whispering continued, and I could feel the chill in the air deepening, the shadows stretching and twisting, as if they were alive. Suddenly, the light flickered again and went out, plunging me into total darkness. My heart raced, and panic surged through me. I stumbled back, disoriented, as the whispers grew louder, echoing in my mind. The walls seemed to close in around me, and I felt a presence, something cold and malevolent, lurking just out of sight. I had to escape. I had to get out of this room. In the darkness, I lunged toward the door, my hands grasping for the handle. With a desperate shove, I slammed my shoulder against it, forcing it open with all my strength. The door creaked, then burst free, and I stumbled back into the basement, gasping for breath. I quickly turned the flashlight back on, illuminating the space. The air felt different now, charged with an unsettling energy. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had awakened something that had been dormant for too long. I had uncovered my grandfather's secrets, but now it was clear that the truth was more terrifying than I could have ever imagined. I had to leave the basement, but I knew I wouldn't be able to escape the shadows that had followed me into the light. As I climbed the stairs, the echoes of the whispers lingered in my mind, promising that the real story was far from over. I had to know who that woman was, what my grandfather had uncovered, and why the shadows were so eager to reveal their secrets. The chill in the air followed me up the stairs, wrapping around me like an unwelcome embrace. As I reached the top, I paused, listening for any sign that I was truly alone. The house remained eerily silent, but the weight of the basement's secrets pressed heavily on my chest. I needed to gather my thoughts and devise a plan. I retreated to my bedroom, closing the door behind me and locking it for good measure. My heart raced as I tried to process the whirlwind of revelations. The letters from my grandfather hinted at a danger that I could barely comprehend, and the whispers in the dark still echoed in my mind. I had to learn more about the woman in the photographs, who she was and why she haunted my grandfather's past. Grabbing my laptop, I began searching for information. My fingers flew over the keyboard as I scoured old newspaper articles and public records. I typed in the name of our small town, filtering through anything that could shed light on my grandfather's history. After what felt like hours, I stumbled upon a faded article from decades ago discussing the mysterious disappearance of several townspeople, including a woman who matched the description of the figure in the photographs. Her name was Sarah Hale, and the article described her as a reclusive artist who had lived on the outskirts of town. The last known sighting was around the time my grandfather had locked the door to the basement. As I read through the article, a sinking feeling settled in my stomach. Sarah had reportedly been involved in dark rituals, seeking to communicate with the dead and uncover the secrets of the afterlife. The article hinted that she had gained a reputation for her strange behavior and had become an object of fear and superstition in our town. The more I read, the more the pieces fell into place. My grandfather hadn't just been protecting his family. He had been trying to shield us from a legacy that had left a dark mark on our town. But why had he never spoken of it? What had compelled him to bury these memories so deeply? A knock at my door startled me, breaking my concentration. My heart raced as I called out, "Who is it?" "It's me, Clara," came the voice of my best friend, Lily. "Are you okay? I heard some noise coming from down here." I hesitated, the secrets swirling in my mind. I didn't want to involve her in this darkness, but the isolation was suffocating. "Yeah, I've seen it. Just a little overwhelmed," I replied, trying to sound casual. Lily opened the door slowly, concern etched on her face. "You don't look fine. What's going on?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "It's just my grandfather's stuff. I found some strange things in the basement." "What kind of strange things?" she asked, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. I took a deep breath, deciding to share just enough without revealing everything. "Old letters and photographs. There's this woman who seemed to have been part of his life, and it's all really unsettling. I think he was hiding something from me." Lily's eyes widened. "What do you mean? Like a family secret?" "Something like that. I found out she might have been involved in some dark stuff, rituals or something. It's all really creepy," I said, feeling the tension build in the room. Lily frowned, her brow furrowing. "Have you thought about talking to someone? Maybe a historian or someone who knows about the town's past?" "That's actually a good idea," I admitted. "But there's more." I heard whispers in the basement, and the door slammed shut on its own. It felt like something was there with me. Lily's expression shifted from concern to disbelief. "Whispers? Clara, you're scaring me. I know it sounds crazy, but I swear I'm not making this up." It felt so real. "I need to figure this out, but I don't know where to start," I confessed. "Let's go together," Lily suggested. "We can look for more information, maybe even visit the places mentioned in those articles." Her offer brought a flicker of hope. "That could work. I just need to be careful. If my grandfather was involved in something dangerous, I don't want you to get dragged into it." Lily placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "I can handle myself. You're not alone in this. We'll figure it out together." After a brief discussion, we made a plan to visit the local library in the morning. I felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. It was time to face whatever my grandfather had been hiding. That night, I tried to sleep but was restless, the images of Sarah Hale and the whispers haunting my thoughts. My dreams were filled with shadows and flickering lights, remnants of the basement's secrets swirling around me. Each time I awoke, I felt an unsettling presence, as if something was watching me from the dark corners of my room. As dawn broke, I rose with a sense of purpose. I wouldn't let fear control me. I needed answers. Lily and I arrived at the library just as it opened, the cool morning air sharpening my resolve. We dove into old records, combing through town archives and local history books. The more we searched, the more we unearthed stories of Sarah Hale, rumors of her mysterious art, and the chilling events surrounding her disappearance. Finally, we found a book that detailed the town's haunted history, including mention of the old house where Sarah had lived. The Holloway House, it read, is rumored to be a site of dark rituals and unexplained phenomena. The last entry spoke of a flickering light that could still be seen in the attic during full moons. "Do you think we should check it out?" Lily asked, glancing at me with a mix of excitement and apprehension. I hesitated, feeling the weight of my grandfather's warnings. But curiosity gnawed at me. "Yes, but we need to be careful. If there's any truth to the stories, we might be stepping into something dangerous." We spent the rest of the day preparing, gathering flashlights and supplies. As evening approached, an unsettling anticipation filled the air. I could feel the shadows lurking just beyond the edges of my mind, whispering secrets I was determined to uncover. That night, we made our way to the Holloway house, the moon casting an eerie glow over the abandoned property. The air felt electric, charged with an energy that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. As we approached the front door, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever lay ahead. With a push, the door creaked open, revealing the darkness within. We stepped inside, and the whispers of the past seemed to swirl around us, beckoning us deeper into the shadows. The air inside the Holloway house was stale and thick, carrying the scent of mildew and decay. As we stepped over the threshold, the door creaked ominously behind us, closing with a soft thud. A shiver ran down my spine. This place felt alive in a way that made my skin crawl. "Are you sure about this?" Lily whispered, her voice barely breaking the heavy silence. I nodded, though uncertainty gnawed at me. We need to find out the truth about Sarah Hale. If my grandfather was trying to protect our family from something, we owe it to him to understand what that was. With our flashlights in hand, we began our exploration, the beams of light slicing through the darkness. The once grand foyer was now a shadow of its former self, filled with dust and debris. Faded wallpaper peeled away from the walls, revealing patches of weathered wood beneath. We moved cautiously, stepping over broken floorboards and shattered glass. Each creak of the house echoed like a ghostly reminder of the lives once lived within its walls. As we ventured deeper, the atmosphere shifted, a palpable tension settling around us. "Let's check the upstairs first," I suggested, leading the way up a narrow staircase. The wooden steps groaned under our weight, as if protesting our intrusion. The second floor was dimly lit, the light from our flashlights barely illuminating the corners. We entered the first bedroom, and my heart raced as I scanned the room. Old furniture lay draped in white sheets, ghostly figures frozen in time. A large mirror leaned precariously against the wall, its surface tarnished and cracked. "Look at this," Lily said, her voice trembling as she approached a dusty chest in the corner. "I wonder what's inside." As she tugged at the lid, a cloud of dust erupted into the air. The chest creaked open, revealing a collection of faded photographs, old letters, and an assortment of trinkets. I sifted through the contents, heart pounding as I unearthed a picture of Sarah Hale. Her eyes seemed to bore into mine, filled with a haunting sadness. I shivered and passed the photo to Lily. "Who was she?" Lily asked, flipping over the picture to reveal a date scrawled in fading ink. "November 15th, 1965. "I don't know, but I feel like we're getting closer to understanding her story," I replied. "Maybe these letters will tell us more." As I rifled through the papers, one letter caught my eye. The handwriting was elegant but shaky, as if written in haste. The message was fragmented, but the words "trapped" and "darkness" stood out, sending a chill down my spine. "Clara, listen to this," Lily urged, reading over my shoulder. "I can hear them calling to me from the shadows. They are restless, and I fear they will find me soon." The weight of her words settled heavily on my chest. This doesn't sound good. It's like she knew something was coming. We continued to sift through the letters, piecing together fragments of Sarah's life. The deeper we delved, the more we uncovered, tales of strange occurrences and unsettling happenings that plagued her life in this house. "Do you think she was actually communicating with spirits?" Lily pondered, glancing nervously around the dim room. "Maybe," I replied, feeling the air grow colder. "Or perhaps it was something darker. Whatever it was, it drove her to isolation." As we continued to explore the room, I felt an unsettling presence at my back. I turned quickly, shining my flashlight toward the door, but there was nothing there. Just the darkness, heavy and suffocating. "Clara, are you okay?" Lily asked, her voice laced with concern. "I'm fine, just a weird feeling," I replied, trying to shake off the unease creeping over me. We decided to check the attic next. The stairs leading up creaked underfoot, each step filled with anticipation. As we reached the top, we opened the door to the attic, revealing a small, dusty space filled with old furniture, trunks, and cobwebs. In the corner, a large trunk caught my eye. It was locked, its surface engraved with intricate designs. I felt drawn to it, my heart racing as I approached. "Should we open it?" Lily asked, her voice hesitant. "Maybe there's something important inside," I replied, glancing around for a way to unlock it. If Sarah hid something here, it could be crucial to understanding what happened to her. I searched the room, and my eyes fell upon a rusty key hanging from a nail on the wall. With a mixture of excitement and apprehension, I grabbed it and inserted it into the lock. The mechanism clicked, and I held my breath as I lifted the lid. Inside, I found a collection of old journals, their pages yellowed and brittle. I opened the first one, and as I read the entry, my blood ran cold. November 12th, 1965. I can hear them again. Their whispers crawl into my mind at night, pulling me deeper into their world. I must find a way to escape this house before it consumes me. Clara, what does it say? Lily asked, peering over my shoulder. Something is definitely wrong. She felt like she was being hunted. I replied, flipping through more pages. The entries grew increasingly frantic, filled with desperate pleas for help and strange descriptions of shadows lurking in the corners. The final entry sent chills down my spine. December 1st, 1965. I fear I am losing myself. The darkness is closing in, and I can feel them watching. I must hide the truth. No one must know. Suddenly, the temperature in the attic plummeted, and an oppressive weight pressed down on us. I glanced around, feeling the shadows stretch and shift. We should go, Lily urged, her voice shaking. This doesn't feel safe. Before I could respond, a loud crash echoed from downstairs, reverberating through the walls. My heart raced as the reality of our situation set in. Something was in this house with us, and it wasn't friendly. Clara, we need to leave now, Lily shouted, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward the door. As we hurried down the stairs, the whispers grew louder, swirling around us like a storm. The house seemed to come alive, the floorboards creaking in protest as we raced toward the exit. Run! I yelled, adrenaline pumping through my veins. We burst through the front door, stumbling into the cool night air, desperate to escape the suffocating darkness of the Holloway house. But as we looked back, the flickering light in the attic glowed brighter, casting long shadows across the lawn. The whispers faded into a chilling silence, leaving us breathless and shaken. We had uncovered something that night, but the real horror was far from over. The house had shared its secrets, but now, I felt an ominous presence lingering just beyond the edge of my consciousness. What had we awakened? We stood on the lawn, the chill of the night air wrapping around us like a cold blanket. The Holloway house loomed behind us, its darkened windows resembling hollow eyes, watching our every move. What just happened in there? Lily asked, her voice trembling. I don't know, but we need to figure out what Sarah was trying to hide, I replied, glancing back at the house. She was scared, terrified even. There's something deeper here. The adrenaline was still coursing through my veins, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't just left a haunted house behind. As we stood there, a new determination began to take root within me. We couldn't turn away now. Let's head back to my place and look through the journals, I suggested, feeling a mix of fear and urgency. There has to be something we missed. As we walked back to my house, I couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. It was as if the shadows from the Holloway house had followed us, trailing just out of sight. I pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. Once inside, I spread the journals out on my dining table, the faint smell of aged paper wafting up as I flipped through the entries again. Look at this one, I said, pointing to a page marked with Sarah's shaky handwriting. They come at night, creeping through the walls. I can hear them whispering my name. I fear I am losing my mind. Lily leaned in closer, her brow furrowing. This is all so disturbing. But what does she mean by they? I don't know. Maybe it's the shadow she mentioned. Whatever it is, it clearly drove her to the edge. I replied, feeling a knot of unease tighten in my stomach. Do you think we should try to contact her? Lily suggested tentatively. I mean, if she was reaching out, maybe we can help her. I hesitated, the thought sending a chill down my spine. You mean like a seance? I've never done anything like that before. What if we provoke whatever is in that house? We've already disturbed it by being there, she reasoned. Maybe it's our only way to understand what's happening. The idea rattled me, but I knew we were in too deep to back out now. Okay, let's gather some supplies and set it up. We spent the next hour preparing. I gathered candles, a large bowl, and a few crystals I had collected over the years. As we arranged the items in a circle on the floor, A sense of foreboding hung in the air, thickening with every passing moment. Once everything was ready, we lit the candles, their flickering flames casting long shadows across the room. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the racing of my heart. "Are you ready?" I asked Lily, who nodded but looked pale. "Let's do this," she replied, though her voice was barely above a whisper. We sat cross-legged in the circle, holding hands. I closed my eyes, focusing on my breathing. "Sarah Hale, if you can hear us, please come forward," I called out, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my insides. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a soft breeze seemed to blow through the room, extinguishing one of the candles. I opened my eyes, glancing at Lily, who looked just as startled as I felt. "Maybe we should try again," I said, my voice wavering. "Sarah, if you are here, we want to help you. Please let us know you're with us." Suddenly, the remaining candles flickered violently, and the room grew colder. A distant sound echoed through the space, like soft whispering, just out of reach. My heart raced as the whispers grew louder, swirling around us like a windstorm. "Clara, I don't like this," Lily said, squeezing my hand tightly. "Just hold on," I replied, forcing myself to stay focused. "We need to hear what she has to say." The whispers became clearer, forming fragmented words. I strained to listen, and then I heard it. "Help, trapped shadows." My breath hitched. "Did you hear that?" I asked, looking at Lily. She nodded, her eyes wide with fear. "What does it mean?" "I don't know, but it sounds like she's still here, still trying to reach out to us," I said, trying to maintain my composure. Just then, a loud bang echoed through the room, and a heavy thud reverberated from the walls. The lights flickered, casting erratic shadows that danced across the floor. "Clara!" Lily shouted, her voice a mixture of fear and urgency. "We need to stop." Before I could respond, the whispers intensified, rising to a frantic pitch. The room felt alive, vibrating with energy, as if the very walls were trying to communicate something vital. "Sarah, please," I yelled, desperate to cut through the chaos. "What do you want us to know?" The noise suddenly stopped, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The candles flickered out completely, plunging us into darkness. "Clara, I can't see," Lily cried, panic rising in her voice. "Just hold on." I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam illuminated the room, but as it swept across the walls, my heart dropped. Dark figures appeared, shadows shifting in the corners. They moved closer, swirling around us, whispering incoherent words. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Lily's hand as we bolted from the room, the shadows closing in behind us. We stumbled into the hallway, hearts pounding as we raced toward the front door. But as we reached for the handle, it wouldn't budge. "Clara, it's locked," Lily gasped, panic etched across her face. "Let me try." I pulled at the door with all my strength, but it held fast. The whispers grew louder, pressing in around us, suffocating and sinister. "Sarah, we're trying to help you," I yelled, desperation filling my voice. In that moment, the shadows surged forward, swirling around us in a frenzy. I could feel a presence brushing against my skin, cold and clammy, a whispering breath against my ear. "Help me, free me," the voice echoed, deep and sorrowful. Just then, the door swung open with a force that sent us tumbling out onto the porch. We scrambled to our feet, gasping for air, but the shadows receded into the house, leaving only silence in their wake. Breathless and shaken, we looked back at the Holloway house, its dark windows now appearing almost tranquil. "What just happened?" Lily whispered, trembling. "I think we made contact," I replied, trying to steady my racing heart. "But we're nowhere near finished. We need to figure out how to help her." The night was far from over, and the Holloway house still held many secrets. The shadows had revealed themselves, but they were only a piece of the puzzle. We had a long way to go before we could understand the darkness that had trapped Sarah Hale within those walls. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents. The sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting soft patterns on my bedroom wall. I woke up to the familiar hum of my alarm clock, the morning routine still fresh in my mind. I rolled out of bed and stretched, shaking off the remnants of sleep. Today was going to be just like any other day, or so I thought. As I made my way to the bathroom, the cool tiles felt refreshing against my feet. I turned on the faucet, splashing some water on my face. Looking up at the mirror, I expected to see my usual reflection: messy hair, sleepy eyes, a slightly crooked smile. Instead, I froze. My reflection didn't match. The girl staring back at me looked almost identical. Same brown hair, same green eyes, but there was something distinctly off. Her expression was blank, devoid of the usual morning weariness that I felt. I blinked, hoping it was just a trick of the light. But as I moved, my reflection remained eerily still, as if it was a frame captured in time. Okay, this is weird, I muttered under my breath, stepping closer to the mirror. I raised a hand to touch my cheek, and my reflection mirrored the motion. But the face was still, staring back at me with an unsettling calm. "Stop it," I whispered, shaking my head. "It's just a mirror." I took a step back, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that crept over me. I splashed more water on my face, hoping to wake myself up fully. But when I looked back up, my reflection wore a smile, a grin that I hadn't given it. My heart raced as I stumbled back, colliding with the edge of the sink. "What is happening?" I gasped, my breath coming in quick bursts. The reflection continued to smile, an expression of pure mockery. I felt a chill race down my spine, and the hairs on my arms stood on end. "This isn't funny," I said, my voice shaky. In a moment of desperation, I turned away from the mirror, willing myself to regain control. I grabbed my toothbrush and tried to focus on a mundane task, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I glanced up, I caught a fleeting glimpse of that mocking smile. It was as if the reflection was teasing me, waiting for the moment I'd lose my composure. "Enough," I said firmly, spitting toothpaste into the sink. "It's just a mirror. Get a grip." But as I finished brushing my teeth, the reflection did something that sent my heart plummeting into my stomach. It winked at me. "Okay, this is seriously messed up," I whispered, my voice trembling. I turned away, needing to escape the suffocating tension that had filled the bathroom. I left the room, my mind racing with possibilities. What was going on? Was I losing my mind? I tried to brush it off as a strange dream or fatigue, but deep down, I felt a sense of dread growing. As I moved through the house, the incident lingered in the back of my mind, a haunting specter I couldn't shake. I tried to focus on my morning routine, but every noise, every creak of the house felt amplified, like a heartbeat echoing in the silence. When I finally sat down to breakfast, the unease clung to me. I glanced toward the hallway mirror, half expecting to see that mocking face peering back at me. But it was just my reflection, dull and unremarkable. "Get it together," I muttered to myself, taking a bite of toast. It was just a weird moment, but as the day unfolded, the sense of unease followed me, a shadow lurking just beyond my awareness. I tried to dismiss it, but every now and then, I felt a cold chill creeping over me, and I would glance at the mirrors around the house, half expecting to see that grin again. The hours passed slowly, and I tried to distract myself with work and chores. But the memory of that morning lingered like a fog, thick and heavy, refusing to lift. Finally, as evening fell, I decided I needed to confront this strange occurrence. I headed back to the bathroom, my heart racing with both fear and curiosity. I took a deep breath and faced the mirror once more, the soft glow of the bathroom light illuminating my features. The reflection stared back, ordinary and real. "Okay," I said, my voice steadier this time. "Show me what you got." "Nothing. Just me," the same tired expression from before. I felt a mixture of relief and frustration. Maybe it had all been a fluke. But as I turned to leave, I caught something in the corner of my eye. My reflection remained, smiling again. "Why won't you leave me alone?" I shouted at the mirror, the panic boiling over. The reflection's smile widened, and it raised its hand, mimicking mine. I froze, and the smile twisted into something darker, more sinister. In that moment, I understood. This was no simple reflection. It was a harbinger of something far more dangerous, something that had taken root in my reality. I stumbled back, fear gripping my chest. As I turned to run, I heard the laughter, a haunting echo of my own voice, mocking me from the mirror as I fled the bathroom. "Get out!" I screamed, my voice reverberating through the house. But the shadows in the corners seemed to close in, and the laughter followed me, a relentless reminder that the day my reflection didn't match was only the beginning. Panic surged through me as I dashed into my bedroom, slamming the door behind me. I pressed my back against it, my heart pounding wildly. The laughter, that haunting echo of my own voice, filled my mind. I needed to escape, to figure out what was happening. Breathing heavily, I glanced around my room, searching for a distraction. I grabbed my phone and dialed my best friend Mia. The familiar ringtone felt like a lifeline. After a few rings, she picked up. "Hey, what's up?" Mia's cheerful voice contrasted sharply with my spiraling anxiety. "Mia, something strange is happening," I blurted out. "I need you to come over." "Okay, calm down. What's going on?" I hesitated, unsure of how to explain. "It's about my reflection. I swear it was different this morning. It smiled at me. I don't know what to think." There was a pause on the line, and I could almost hear Mia processing my words. "Your reflection? Like it wasn't you." "Exactly. It felt like it was mocking me. I don't know if I'm losing it or what," I replied, panic rising again. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. Just breathe, okay?" I hung up, my fingers trembling. 15 minutes felt like an eternity. I needed to do something, anything, to distract myself. I paced around my room, my eyes darting to the mirrors that hung on the walls, each one a potential portal to the unknown. Then, I remembered the old family photo album I had stashed away. Maybe it could help ground me. I hurried to my closet, digging through the boxes until I found it. Dust coated the cover, and as I opened it, the familiar scent of aged paper wafted up. Flipping through the pages, I felt nostalgia wash over me. Pictures of birthdays, family gatherings, and vacations. But one photo caught my attention. It was an old black and white picture of my grandfather standing in front of a house. A strange feeling tugged at me as I noticed something in the background, a figure standing in the shadows, partially obscured by the trees. I squinted, trying to make out the details. It looked like a woman, her face hidden, but something about her posture sent chills down my spine. The longer I stared, the more the feeling of unease returned, as if that figure was somehow connected to my current nightmare. Just then, the doorbell rang, jolting me from my thoughts. Relief flooded me as I rushed to answer it. Mia stood there, concern etched on her face. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked, stepping inside. "I don't know," I admitted, leading her to my room. "I've been trying to distract myself." As I explained everything again, I felt a little calmer, having someone to share my fear with. "You need to see this photo," I said, showing her the picture of my grandfather. Mia leaned closer, her brows furrowing. "Who's that in the background?" "I have no idea. I've never seen her before. But look at how she's standing. It's creepy." Mia shivered slightly. "That is strange. Do you think it's connected to what's happening with your reflection?" "I don't know. I'm just trying to make sense of it all," I said, frustration creeping in again. Why would I see a different reflection? And why did it smile at me? "Let's think this through," Mia suggested, taking a seat on the edge of my bed. "Have you felt anything strange in the house before today?" I thought back, trying to remember any odd occurrences. There have been moments, like shadows in the corners, or that feeling of being watched. But I brushed it off. Mia nodded. "Maybe it's time to stop brushing things off. We should investigate a bit more." "Investigate?" I echoed, my heart racing. "Yeah, start with the mirrors. Maybe something is off about them. We could even check the bathroom mirror again." "I don't know if I want to go back in there," I replied, my pulse quickening at the thought. "Just think of it as gathering evidence," Mia encouraged, her determination palpable. "We can face it together." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Okay, let's do it." We made our way to the bathroom, and as I opened the door, the air felt charged, thick with anticipation. The mirror loomed in front of us, reflecting our anxious expressions. "All right, on the count of 3, Mia said, her voice steady. 1, 2, 3. We both stepped closer to the mirror, examining it closely. The surface shimmered, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. just the two of us staring back. I let out a shaky breath, relief flooding through me. "See? Nothing to be afraid of," Mia said, though her voice had a slight tremor. But just as I was about to turn away, I caught a flicker of movement behind us in the reflection. My heart dropped as I saw a shadow creeping across the bathroom doorway. Only it was moving independently of us. "Mia, look," I gasped, pointing. She turned, but the shadow vanished as quickly as it had appeared. The air felt electric, heavy with an unseen presence. "Did you see that?" I asked, panic rising again. "Yeah, I did," Mia whispered, stepping back. "What was that?" Before I could respond, a loud crash echoed from the hallway, making us both jump. It sounded like something had fallen over. "What was that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know, but we need to check it out," Mia said, her eyes wide with fear. With a nod, we cautiously stepped out of the bathroom, the unsettling feeling creeping back in as we moved down the dimly lit hallway. Each step felt like we were walking into a trap, the shadows closing in around us. As we approached the source of the noise, I felt a growing sense of dread. Something was waiting for us, something that had been stirred awake. The hallway felt unnaturally cold as we crept toward the sound, the air thick with anticipation. Each creak of the floorboards beneath our feet echoed like a warning. I glanced over at Mia, her face pale but determined, and I felt a flicker of reassurance. We were in this together. As we reached the living room, the sight before us sent chills racing down my spine. The large, ornate mirror that hung on the wall had fallen, shards of glass glimmering like jagged teeth scattered across the floor. "What happened?" Mia breathed, stepping cautiously into the room. I don't know," I stammered, my eyes drawn to the remnants of the mirror. "It was fine just a minute ago." Mia knelt down, examining the broken pieces. "It must have been loose, but this is weird." She picked up one of the larger shards, tilting it toward the light. "Do you see anything strange in the glass?" I leaned closer, squinting. "No, just our reflections, wait." My voice caught in my throat. "Look at the corners. In the fractured pieces, I could see it. A flicker of something dark and indistinct lurking just beyond the edges of the glass." My breath hitched as I recalled the shadow I had seen in the bathroom. "Mia, do you think?" Before I could finish my thought, a cold gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing the light. We were plunged into darkness, the only sound our breaths mingling with the silence. Panic rose in my chest. "Mia," I shouted, reaching out blindly. "Can you find a light switch?" "I can't see anything," she cried, her voice shaking. Fumbling through the darkness, I felt my way along the wall, fingers brushing against the rough surface. Suddenly, a soft whisper brushed past my ear, chilling me to the bone. "Help me! Did you hear that?" I gasped, spinning around to face Mia. "Yeah," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "What was that?" I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to will away the fear. "It's just the wind. It has to be the wind." But deep down, I knew it was something more. A sense of dread wrapped around me, tightening like a noose. I finally found the switch and flicked it up, the light flooding the room once more. Mia and I stood frozen, scanning the space. Everything appeared normal, but the air felt heavy, oppressive. "Maybe we should go back to your room," Mia suggested, her voice shaky. "This is too much." "Agreed," I said, trying to shake off the lingering fear. We turned to leave when, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement in the mirror frame, a flicker of something just beyond the edge of the light. "Mia, look," I pointed, my heart racing. But as we turned, the mirror was simply reflecting our startled faces back at us, unchanged. I felt a shiver creep up my spine. What had I seen? "Let's just get back to your room," Mia insisted, her voice urgent. We hurried down the hallway, the shadows seeming to stretch and claw at our heels. I could feel the weight of the unseen presence following us, lurking just out of sight. As we reached my room, I slammed the door shut behind us and leaned against it, trying to catch my breath. "What the hell is happening?" I muttered, raking my fingers through my hair. Mia sank onto my bed, her expression grave. "We need to figure this out. Something's not right here." "I don't know where to start," I admitted, feeling defeated. This morning felt like a nightmare, and now it's like it's become real. Mia paused, her eyes narrowing as if a thought struck her. What about the family photo? The one with the woman in the background? Do you think she has anything to do with this? I don't know, I replied, anxiety gripping me. But she definitely feels connected. I need to find out who she is. Mia nodded. Then let's do some digging. Maybe there's something in the attic or the old family records that can give us a clue. All right, I said, feeling a flicker of determination. Let's check the attic. We gathered our courage and climbed the creaky staircase leading to the attic, each step echoing ominously. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, cluttered space filled with old boxes and forgotten memories. Dust motes danced in the faint light streaming through the window. Where do we even start? Mia asked, squinting into the shadows. Let's look for anything related to my grandfather or the family history, I suggested, moving deeper into the attic. There might be something that explains the photo or whatever's happening. As we rummaged through boxes, uncovering old toys, dusty books, and faded clothes, a sense of unease settled in the air. The shadows seemed to grow thicker, and every creak of the floorboards sent my heart racing. Then, Mia gasped, pulling out an old, leather-bound journal. I think I found something. Let me see, I said, hurrying over. The journal was brittle and worn, its pages yellowed with age. As I opened it, the smell of old paper filled the air. The writing was in my grandfather's scrawling script, filled with ramblings about family history, but one entry caught my eye. The shadows have eyes. They watch, waiting for the unwary. The woman in the trees, she calls to me. I fear she knows the truth about our family. My heart dropped. What does this mean? I whispered. Mia leaned closer, her eyes wide with fear. Do you think the woman is the reason your reflection is acting strange? Maybe, I said, my voice trembling. I need to know more. But before I could delve deeper, a loud bang echoed through the attic, shaking the walls. We both jumped back, fear coursing through us. What was that? Mia exclaimed, her eyes darting around the room. I felt my throat go dry. I don't know, but I think we need to get out of here, now. Just as I turned to leave, a cold breeze swept through the attic, snuffing out the light. We were plunged into darkness again, the journal slipping from my grasp and landing with a thud. Mia, stay close, I shouted, panic rising. But as I groped in the dark, I felt something brush against my arm, something cold and unnatural. I froze, my breath hitching in my throat. Who's there? I called, my voice shaking. A whisper echoed around us, chilling me to the bone. Help me. The voice was eerily familiar, like an echo of my own, wrapping around us like a vice. The shadows deepened, swirling with an unseen energy, and I could feel them closing in, trapping us in the dark. Mia, I cried, but the darkness swallowed my words. In that moment, I realized the truth. The shadows weren't just watching. They were waiting. Panic surged through me as the cold whispering intensified, wrapping around my senses like a heavy fog. Mia, I shouted again, my heart racing. But the oppressive darkness seemed to absorb my voice, rendering it useless. I reached out, feeling for her, the air thick with an unnameable dread. My fingers brushed against something soft, a sleeve perhaps. Mia, is that you? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Yes, I'm right here, she replied, her voice trembling. What's happening? I don't know, but we need to move, I urged, taking her hand. I felt an icy shiver race up my spine as the shadows shifted around us, seeming to pulse with a life of their own. Let's get to the stairs. We began to make our way cautiously through the dark, each step feeling heavier than the last. The darkness felt alive, pressing in on us, making it harder to breathe. Suddenly, the whisper returned, clearer this time, echoing through the attic. Help me find me. Mia, do you hear that? I gasped, stopping in my tracks. Yes, it sounds like it's coming from over there, she said, pointing toward a far corner of the attic, where the shadows seemed to cluster thickest. Against every instinct screaming for us to flee, curiosity pulled me forward. What if it's someone in trouble? I wondered aloud, though my heart raced with fear. Or something dangerous, Mia countered, her voice strained. We shouldn't. But before she could finish, I stepped closer, drawn by the mysterious voice. As I neared the shadows, a sudden gust of wind swept through the attic, momentarily parting the darkness to reveal an old trunk half buried beneath cobwebs. Look, I exclaimed, pointing to the trunk. What if whatever is in there can explain all this? Mia hesitated, but eventually nodded. Okay, but we need to be careful. We approached the trunk, the whisper growing louder, urging us closer. I knelt down and lifted the heavy lid, wincing as it creaked open, releasing a cloud of dust that danced in the faint light. Inside, I found an assortment of old belongings, faded photographs, yellowed letters, and an intricately carved wooden box. The whispers seemed to swirl around us, their intensity increasing as I reached for the box. Mia, do you feel that? I asked, the air vibrating with an eerie energy. Yeah, it's like something's alive in there, she replied, her voice shaky. With trembling hands, I opened the box. Inside, there were several small, ornate dolls, their glassy eyes staring back at me with an unsettling intensity. Each doll was dressed in clothing from a different era, their expressions frozen in time. Why are they here? I wondered aloud, lifting one of the dolls. Its eyes seemed to glimmer with an otherworldly light, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. As I examined the doll, the whispers coalesced into a single, haunting phrase. Release us. Release us. Mia echoed, her face pale. What does that mean? I think these dolls are connected to the shadows, to whatever is haunting us, I said, feeling a strange compulsion to set them free. Maybe if we find out their story, we can break this curse. Mia's eyes darted to the shadows, which seemed to pulse with anticipation. Or we could make things worse, she warned. What if we unleash something we can't control? Before I could respond, the shadows surged forward, enveloping us in darkness once more. The whisper became a deafening roar, echoing through the attic, drowning out all rational thought. Help us. Release us. I felt the weight of the air change, a pressure building around us. It was as if the very essence of the attic was shifting, reshaping itself into something malevolent. The shadows coalesced into a dark figure, vaguely human but distorted, with eyes that glimmered like stars in the void. Mia, we need to go. Now, I shouted, grabbing her hand again. We stumbled backward, our hearts racing as we rushed toward the attic door. But the shadows were fast closing in, blocking our escape. The figure's voice echoed, low and resonant, filled with pain and anger. You cannot leave. Not yet. Desperation fueled our flight as I fumbled for the door handle. Please let us go, I begged, the shadows swirling around us like a storm. The air crackled with energy, and for a moment, time seemed to stretch. I felt a sudden surge of resolve. Mia, the dolls, we need to do something with them. I don't know what to do, she cried, panic rising in her voice. What if we break them? Maybe that's the point, I shouted, my heart pounding. They're trapped. If we can free them, we might break this hold. With a burst of adrenaline, I pulled one of the dolls from the box and hurled it against the wall. The moment it shattered, a blinding light erupted, momentarily illuminating the room and dispelling the shadows. The figure let out a howl of rage and despair, its form wavering as if caught in a tempest. No, you must not. Mia grabbed another doll, her determination rekindled. We have to do it together. We both threw the dolls at the walls, shattering their glassy forms and releasing the blinding light. Each time a doll broke, the figure flickered, its grip on the shadows loosening. Keep going, I shouted, feeling a surge of hope. Finally, with the last doll in hand, we stepped back, ready to confront the darkness. This ends now, I yelled, and we smashed it against the floor. A deafening roar filled the attic as the shadows writhed and twisted, screaming in fury. Light flooded the space, engulfing us in warmth and banishing the darkness. As the shadows dissipated, the figure faded into nothingness, leaving behind a profound silence. Breathless and shaken, Mia and I stared at the remnants of the dolls, the echoes of the past finally laid to rest. "I think we did it," I whispered, still feeling the tremors of fear running through me. "Yeah," Mia replied, her eyes wide. "But what does this mean for us? Are we safe now?" I didn't know the answer, but as I looked around the attic, the weight of dread had lifted. Perhaps we had not just freed the spirits trapped in the dolls, but also ourselves from the grasp of the past. But deep down, I sensed that the shadows might still linger, waiting for another chance to return. And in the back of my mind, a haunting question remained. What other secrets lay hidden in the corners of this house? As the last remnants of the shadows faded away, a heavy silence settled in the attic. The air felt lighter, but the fear still pulsed beneath the surface. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the lingering unease. "Mia, are you okay?" I asked, glancing at her. Her face was pale, but her eyes sparkled with a mix of relief and lingering apprehension. "I think so," she replied, her voice shaky. "But what just happened? What were those dolls?" I looked around, feeling a deep sense of unease. "I don't know, but they were clearly tied to whatever was haunting this place. Maybe they were trapped spirits or manifestations of something darker." Mia nodded slowly, her brow furrowed in thought. "Do you think this is over? I mean, we broke the dolls, but what if the spirits aren't truly gone?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but we should investigate more. There might be other clues hidden in this house, things that explain what we just went through." We carefully stepped over the remnants of the shattered dolls, moving deeper into the attic. Dust motes danced in the beams of light streaming through the windows, creating an eerie contrast to the darkness we had just escaped. As we searched, I noticed an old trunk tucked away in a corner, almost obscured by cobwebs. "Look at that," I said, pointing it out. "It might contain something important." Mia and I approached it cautiously. The trunk was weathered, with rusted hinges and an intricate lock that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. "Do you think it's locked?" she asked, glancing at me. "Only one way to find out," I replied, kneeling down to inspect the lock. I fished around in my pockets and found a small hairpin I had been using to keep my hair in place. "Let's see if this works," I muttered, sliding the pin into the lock. After a few tries, I felt the satisfying click of the mechanism giving way. With a deep breath, I lifted the lid. Inside, I found a collection of dusty old letters, photographs, and various trinkets. As I sifted through them, one photograph caught my eye, an image of a family standing in front of a similar house, the smiles on their faces stark against the shadows of the trees behind them. "Mia, look at this," I said, holding it up. "This must have been taken decades ago, but it looks just like our house." She peered closer, her eyes widening. "And look at the woman in the center. She looks just like you." I felt a chill race down my spine. The resemblance was uncanny. "That's impossible," I whispered. "Who are they?" Mia reached for a nearby letter and unfolded it. "It looks like a diary entry," she said, reading aloud. "Today, we moved into our new home. The children are excited, but there's something about this place, an unsettling feeling lingers. I keep hearing whispers at night, and sometimes I feel as though I'm being watched. I must remember to keep the attic locked." As she read, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "Whispers, just like we heard?" I asked. "Yes," Mia replied, her voice trembling. "And she mentions an unsettling feeling. It sounds like she experienced the same things we did." We continued sifting through the trunk, uncovering more letters that detailed the family's experiences in the house. Each entry grew darker, filled with mentions of strange noises, shadows lurking at the edges of vision, and the increasing isolation of the family. "It's like they were slowly being consumed by the house," I said, dread creeping in. "What happened to them?" Mia found another letter, and as she read, her voice faltered. The last entry, it's dated a week before they disappeared. She writes about hearing a child's laughter in the attic and seeing shadows that seem to move on their own. She talks about feeling a pull toward the darkness. "That can't be good," I said, exchanging worried glances with Mia. We fell silent, the weight of the discovery settling over us like a shroud. "What if this family is connected to the dolls?" I suggested, piecing together the fragments of the story. "What if they never escaped?" A sense of urgency washed over us. We have to find out what happened, Mia said, determination igniting in her eyes. We need to uncover the truth. I nodded, feeling a new resolve. Let's check the rest of the house. There might be more clues. We descended the attic stairs cautiously, the echoes of our footsteps reverberating through the quiet house. The air felt charged, as if the walls themselves were listening to our every word. As we moved through the dimly lit rooms, I could sense the history enveloping us, a tapestry of joy and sorrow woven into every corner. It was as if the house was alive, holding its secrets close. Where do we start? Mia asked, glancing around. Let's head to the living room, I suggested. It seems like a central point in the house. If there are any remnants of the family's life, they might be there. We stepped into the living room, where the faint glow of sunlight filtered through the dusty windows. The furniture was draped in sheets, as if the house had been abandoned for years. I approached the mantelpiece, where old photographs and trinkets lay scattered. One photo caught my eye, a family portrait. The same woman from the photograph in the trunk stood in the center, flanked by 2 children. Their faces were radiant with joy. Mia, look at this, I said, holding it up. It's the same family. As she leaned in, a sudden chill swept through the room. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I felt an inexplicable sense of dread creeping back in. Mia, do you feel that? I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. Yes, she replied, her eyes wide with fear. It's like something is watching us again. I turned slowly, scanning the room, but there was nothing there. The silence felt heavy, oppressive. And then, I heard it, a soft, childlike giggle echoing through the air. It was faint but unmistakable, sending a chill down my spine. Mia, did you hear that? I asked, my heart racing. Yes, it's coming from upstairs, she said, pointing toward the staircase. Without thinking, I started moving toward the stairs, a mixture of fear and curiosity pushing me forward. The giggle rang out again, light and airy, luring us into the darkness. Mia, wait, I called, but she was already halfway up the stairs, drawn by the sound. As I followed her, the air thickened with an unsettling energy, each step feeling heavier than the last. The giggling grew louder, echoing off the walls like a distant memory. Mia, we have to be careful, I warned, my voice trembling. But it was too late. We reached the top of the stairs, and the sound abruptly stopped. A cold silence enveloped us, the anticipation hanging in the air like a storm about to break. What just happened? Mia whispered, glancing around nervously. I don't know, but we have to find out, I replied, stepping into the dim hallway. As we moved cautiously down the corridor, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being drawn into something far beyond our understanding. The shadows seemed to close in around us, ready to reveal whatever dark secrets lay hidden within the walls of this haunted house. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents. The door to the basement had always been a point of curiosity in our old family home. It was a heavy, wooden door, its surface scarred and worn with age. My parents often warned me to stay away, insisting that the basement was not a place for children. But as any kid knows, warnings only stoke the flames of curiosity. One rainy afternoon, with thunder rumbling in the distance, I found myself standing before that door, my heart racing with a mix of fear and excitement. I glanced around to make sure no one was watching, then I grasped the cold metal handle and pulled. The door creaked open, revealing a dark staircase that descended into the shadows. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. The air was stale and cool, carrying a musty scent that hinted at forgotten memories. The faint glow of light from the upstairs hallway quickly faded as I ventured further down the steps, the door creaking shut behind me with a heavy thud. The basement was larger than I had imagined, stretching out into darkness beyond the reach of my flashlight. I flicked the switch on my phone, illuminating the space. The beam of light danced across the concrete walls, revealing old boxes and furniture draped in dusty sheets. As I took a few cautious steps forward, I noticed a series of markings on the wall, faint but distinct. They looked like tally marks, scratched into the surface with something sharp. I traced my fingers along them, feeling a chill run through me as I counted. There were over 100. What is this place? I muttered to myself, a knot forming in my stomach. Ignoring the unease, I pressed on, eager to explore. In the far corner, I spotted an old trunk, its edges rusted and its lid slightly ajar. Intrigued, I hurried over and knelt beside it. My fingers trembled as I lifted the lid, revealing an assortment of old toys, clothes, and books. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, as if it had been untouched for years. As I sifted through the contents, I stumbled upon a small, leather-bound journal. The cover was worn, and the pages were yellowed with age. I flipped it open, revealing neat, elegant handwriting. The first entry was dated nearly 50 years ago. "I'm the last of the Thomas family," it read. "The basement has become my refuge, my prison. I hear whispers in the dark, and the shadows move like living things. They know I am here, and I fear I will never see the light of day again." My heart raced as I read the words. Who was this person? What had happened to them? I turned the pages eagerly, each entry detailing a slow descent into madness. The writer described hearing strange noises, the sensation of being watched, and the ever-growing fear that something lurked just beyond the shadows. The last entry sent a chill down my spine. "The basement has no end. I fear I am trapped in a loop, forever descending into darkness. If anyone finds this journal, do not enter. You will never leave." Suddenly, the air around me shifted, growing colder. I felt a prickle on the back of my neck, as if someone or something was watching me. I slammed the journal shut and dropped it back into the trunk, my pulse racing. I turned to leave, but the moment I did, the sound of scratching echoed through the basement. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. It was coming from behind the wall, a rhythmic scraping that sent shivers down my spine. I glanced back at the trunk, my curiosity battling my fear. Should I investigate? What if I was about to uncover something terrible? The scratching continued, growing louder, more frantic. I took a step back toward the stairs, but the urge to find out what was happening pushed me forward. I slowly approached the wall, pressing my ear against the cold concrete. The noise stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. Just as I was about to step away, a low moan resonated from the darkness. Panic surged through me, and I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the trunk. I needed to get out of there. I turned and sprinted toward the stairs, my flashlight flickering as I ascended. The sound of scratching returned, echoing behind me, almost as if something was following. I burst through the door and slammed it shut, leaning against it with my heart racing. I gasped for breath, my mind racing. What had I just discovered? What was down there in that basement? The fear lingered in the air, wrapping around me like a heavy cloak. I knew I had to return, to confront whatever lay beneath our home. The basement had no end, and I needed to understand why. The next day, the images of the basement haunted me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something vital was hidden down there, something I needed to uncover. I spent the entire afternoon trying to focus on homework, but my mind kept wandering back to the trunk and the journal. I had to return. After dinner, as twilight settled over the neighborhood, I slipped back into the basement, armed with a flashlight and a mix of determination and dread. The door creaked open, and I braced myself for the chill that enveloped me. As I descended the stairs, the air felt denser, thick with an unsettling energy. The light from my flashlight pierced the darkness, illuminating the scattered boxes and forgotten remnants of the past. I steeled myself, pushing forward to the trunk in the corner. With trembling hands, I opened it again, retrieving the journal. This time, I scanned through the pages more carefully, searching for clues about the scratching sound and the ominous warning. The entries had taken a darker turn. The writer spoke of vivid dreams that blurred the lines between reality and nightmare. I can hear them whispering. One entry read, "They want to come out. They want me to join them. I fear I am losing my mind, but I cannot leave. The basement calls to me." As I read, a chilling thought struck me. What if the scratching was not just a figment of the writer's imagination? What if it was something real? My pulse quickened as I recalled the sound from the previous night. Determined to find the source, I moved cautiously towards the wall where the noises had come from. My heart raced as I approached, the scratching echoing in my mind. I pressed my ear against the cold concrete once again. Silence. Just when I thought I had imagined it, the scratching began anew. This time louder, more insistent. I stepped back, my mind racing. I needed a tool, something to pry at the wall. There was a small toolbox nearby, left untouched for years. I rummaged through it, finding a crowbar covered in dust. My fingers tightened around the handle as I returned to the wall, adrenaline pumping through me. With each strike, the concrete chipped away, revealing an unsettling darkness behind it. My breath came in quick gasps as I pushed harder, determined to uncover whatever lay beyond. Suddenly, the wall gave way, a cloud of dust enveloping me as I stumbled back. I peered into the opening, my flashlight illuminating a narrow passage that extended deep into the shadows. The scratching had ceased, replaced by an eerie stillness. I hesitated, glancing back toward the stairs. I could still retreat, but the pull of curiosity was stronger than my fear. With a deep breath, I stepped into the passage. The air was damp and stale, and the walls felt almost alive, pulsating with an unseen energy. I shone my flashlight ahead, revealing a narrow corridor that seemed to twist and turn, disappearing into darkness. As I ventured further, I felt the temperature drop, a chill creeping into my bones. The walls were lined with old photographs, faded and yellowed with age. Each image captured moments of family gatherings, smiles frozen in time. But there was something unsettling about the faces. Some looked familiar, while others were strange, almost shadowy figures lurking in the background. I stopped at one photo that made my heart race. It was a family portrait, my family, taken years ago at a holiday gathering. But in the corner stood a figure I didn't recognize, a tall man with hollow eyes staring directly at the camera. The longer I looked, the more I felt like he was staring right at me. A low moan echoed through the corridor, snapping me out of my trance. I turned sharply, the flashlight beam trembling in my hand. The sound was close, reverberating off the walls, a sorrowful wail that made my skin crawl. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. Silence answered me, heavy and oppressive. I took a cautious step back, my instincts screaming for me to leave. But as I turned to retreat, the passage behind me shifted. The shadows lengthened, closing in around me. Panic surged as I realized the way back was disappearing, the walls seemingly closing in. I pressed forward, hoping to find a way out. When I heard it again, the scratching, now louder, more frantic. It echoed around me, blending with the low moans. I could feel something lurking just beyond the edge of my flashlight's glow. Then, as if compelled by an unseen force, I turned a corner and stumbled into a small, dimly lit chamber. In the center stood an old mirror, its surface cracked and clouded. The scratching intensified, reverberating off the walls as I approached. My reflection flickered uneasily, as if struggling to break free from the glass. I reached out, fingers brushing the cold surface. Suddenly, the air crackled with energy, and the scratching stopped. The mirror pulsed, the glass rippling like water. My heart raced as I stared into it, and for a moment, I thought I saw movement behind my reflection, something lurking, watching. "Get away from there," a voice hissed, snapping me back to reality. I whirled around, heart racing, but the chamber was empty. Alone, but the mirror remained, an ominous presence drawing me closer. I couldn't look away, the darkness behind the glass promising secrets I was both terrified and desperate to uncover. The mirror loomed before me, its surface shimmering with a strange allure. I stepped closer, my breath catching in my throat. The air felt electric, charged with an energy I couldn't quite understand. Something deep within me urged me to touch it again, to uncover the truth hidden behind the fractured glass. As I reached out, my fingers brushed against the cold surface, sending a jolt through my body. The moment I made contact, a vision flashed before my eyes. A scene from the past, a family gathered in this very room, laughter echoing around me. But then, the laughter faded, replaced by a chilling silence. The figures in the vision turned, their faces twisted in fear, their eyes wide with horror. I yanked my hand back, heart pounding. What was happening? Was this some kind of trick, or was the mirror a portal to the past? I needed answers, and the only way to get them was to look deeper. Taking a steadying breath, I placed both hands on the frame, pushing against the cold wood. The scratching noise returned, louder than before, as if something was trying to break free. I could feel the walls of the chamber tremble around me, the shadows growing thicker. "Who's there?" I called again, my voice steadier this time. Silence enveloped me, pressing in from all sides. I turned back to the mirror, feeling drawn to it despite my growing unease. This time, I looked beyond my reflection. The glass shifted, revealing flickers of movement, a shadowy figure behind me, just out of reach. Panic surged as I whirled around, but nothing was there. Just the empty corridor, the echo of my breath filling the silence. "Stay away from the mirror." The voice came again, sharper, more insistent this time. I turned back, searching the mirror's depths. The figure appeared again, more defined this time, a woman with hollow eyes and a face twisted in anguish. I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible, echoing with desperation. "You have to help me." "What do you want?" I asked, my voice trembling. The shadows around the mirror danced wildly, as if responding to her plea. "Free me," she begged, extending a pale hand towards me. "It's trapped me for so long. You have to break the glass." My heart raced. Break the glass? Was I really considering it? What if the mirror held the key to the darkness that haunted this place? The scratching intensified, a frantic reminder of the urgency of the moment. I glanced around, half expecting something to lunge at me from the shadows. But there was only the mirror, calling to me. With a deep breath, I stepped back, my mind racing. If I was going to break the glass, I needed something heavy, something to shatter its surface. I turned back toward the toolbox, grabbing a heavy wrench. As I approached the mirror again, the woman's eyes widened with fear. "No, don't!" But I couldn't stop now. I raised the wrench, ready to strike. Just before I swung, her voice rang out again, this time frantic. "You don't understand. It's not just me. There are others trapped, like me." "What do you mean?" I shouted, my voice echoing in the chamber. But she didn't answer. Instead, the mirror rippled again, and the scratching grew deafening, as if something inside was clawing to escape. In a moment of hesitation, I brought the wrench down with all my might. The glass shattered into 1,000 pieces, splintering and cascading around me like rain. A shockwave of energy surged through the room, knocking me back. I stumbled, falling to the ground as the shards reflected the dim light, creating a kaleidoscope of shadows. As I lay there, gasping for breath, the air grew still. I glanced at the broken mirror, shards glittering ominously on the floor. The scratching had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that enveloped the chamber. Then, from the depths of the shattered glass, a figure began to emerge, a shadow that twisted and contorted, taking shape before my eyes. I scrambled backward, fear gripping my heart. The woman from the mirror stepped out, her form flickering like a candle in the wind, her expression twisted between relief and rage. "You shouldn't have done that," she shrieked, her voice echoing, filling the space with a chilling resonance. "Now they'll come for you." I tried to get to my feet, but the ground felt unsteady beneath me. Who will come?" "Those who were trapped before me," she cried, desperation in her eyes. "You've opened the door. Now, you must face the consequences." Before I could process her words, shadows began to swirl around me, rising from the ground like smoke. I could feel their cold fingers brush against my skin, and panic surged through me. I bolted for the exit, adrenaline propelling me forward as the shadows lunged toward me, grasping at my clothes. I reached the corridor, heart racing as I sprinted down the passageway. Behind me, I could hear the whispers growing louder, an echoing chorus of voices filling the air. They were angry, desperate, and filled with rage. I burst through the entrance to the basement, slamming the doors shut behind me. The sound of scratching faded to a muffled thrum, but I knew it wasn't over. I leaned against the door, breathless, my mind racing with fear and confusion. What had I unleashed? And how could I ever hope to contain it? The basement door trembled behind me, the faint sounds of scratching and muffled voices echoing through the wood. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, but as I stood there, pressed against the door, an unsettling realization settled in. I had opened a door to something far darker than I had anticipated. Desperation clawed at my thoughts. I needed to find a way to understand what I had unleashed. As I glanced around the dimly lit basement, my eyes fell on the old bookshelf I had passed earlier. Perhaps there was something in the books that could provide insight into the darkness that lingered in my home. I made my way to the shelf, the air thick with a musty scent of forgotten knowledge. The books looked ancient, their spines cracked and faded. I pulled one off the shelf, the title barely legible, Whispers of the Forgotten. My hands trembled as I opened it, dust swirling in the faint light. As I flipped through the pages, I found stories of spirits trapped between worlds, bound by their own fears and regrets. The parallels to my experience were chilling. Each tale spoke of individuals who had crossed boundaries they shouldn't have, disturbing entities that had long remained hidden. The recurring theme was clear. Curiosity often leads to calamity. Suddenly, a loud bang jolted me from my thoughts, and I dropped the book, heart racing. I turned to see the door quivering violently, the shadows creeping around the edges as if trying to break through. I rushed to the other side of the basement, seeking refuge behind the old couch that had seen better days. As I crouched there, the shadows seemed to pulse and breathe, coiling like tendrils in the dim light. I could hear the whispers now, clearer than before, a cacophony of voices rising in intensity. "Help us, free us, join us." The chill in the air deepened, wrapping around me like a suffocating shroud. I pressed my hands over my ears, trying to block out the voices, but their urgency only grew louder. It felt as if the very walls were closing in, the darkness pressing against me. Then, through the chaos, one voice broke through, a clear, haunting melody. It was the woman from the mirror. "You opened the door, and now you must decide. Will you help us, or will you flee?" I hesitated, torn between fear and an inexplicable urge to help. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, my voice barely rising above the din. "Face the truth," she replied, her voice echoing with an eerie calm. "The shadows will come for you, but they can be guided. You have the power to choose." "Choose what?" I demanded, my heart pounding. "To break the cycle," she urged. "To confront the past and release the souls trapped in this torment." The voices intensified, rising to a fever pitch as I wrestled with my choices. My thoughts raced back to the stories I had read. The forgotten souls seeking closure, the restless spirits yearning for peace. Could I really help them? Or was I simply inviting my own doom? The door shuddered again, the shadows slithering beneath it, threatening to seep into the basement. I knew I had to act, but what could I do? I glanced back at the bookshelf, a flicker of inspiration igniting within me. I sprinted toward it, frantically searching through the titles. "There has to be something here," I muttered under my breath. My fingers brushed against a particularly ornate book, its cover adorned with symbols I didn't recognize. The Rituals of Release. With trembling hands, I opened it and began to read. The book described various rituals to guide trapped souls to the afterlife, ways to confront the darkness and bring peace to the restless. A chill ran down my spine as I read the instructions, each step detailing how to connect with the lost souls and help them find closure. Just as I reached the most critical part, the door burst open, sending a gust of cold air through the basement. Shadows poured in like a tide, swirling around me, their whispers a frenzy of desperation. "Join us! Join us!" I clutched the book tightly, heart racing. "I will help you," I yelled over the cacophony, my voice rising above the chaos. "But you must give me a chance." The shadows hesitated, momentarily stilling. The woman's face materialized among them, her expression a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "Follow the ritual," she urged. "You have the strength within you. It's time to face the darkness together." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. The voices faded, allowing a moment of silence as I began to recite the words from the book. My voice echoed through the basement, steadying with each syllable. Spirits of the forgotten, I call upon you. Release your burdens and find peace." As I spoke, the shadows writhed and coiled, a palpable tension in the air. The temperature dropped, and I could see my breath clouding before me. The figures began to take shape, their features emerging from the darkness. Anguished faces, twisted with fear and sorrow. "Help us," they cried in unison, their voices blending into a haunting chorus. With renewed determination, I continued the ritual, invoking the names of the lost souls I sensed around me. "You are not alone. Your stories will be heard. Your pain will end." The shadows surged forward, intertwining with the words I spoke, wrapping around me like a living tapestry. I could feel their emotions: pain, regret, longing, and with every utterance, I fought to guide them toward the light. In that moment, I understood I was not just confronting the darkness. I was becoming a beacon for those trapped within it. My heart raced as I poured everything I had into the ritual, tears streaming down my face as the shadows began to dissolve, their anguished cries transforming into whispers of gratitude. Suddenly, a brilliant light erupted from the center of the room, illuminating the basement. The shadows flickered and danced around me, gradually fading away, replaced by a sense of peace that washed over me. As the last remnants of darkness dissipated, I fell to my knees, breathless. The basement was silent now, the weight of fear lifting like a shroud. I had faced the shadows and, in doing so, had discovered a strength I never knew I possessed. But even as I knelt there, exhausted yet exhilarated, I felt a lingering presence, a whisper of the past reminding me that while I had helped some, there were many more stories left to uncover. The journey was far from over. The light faded, leaving the basement in a gentle twilight, a stark contrast to the oppressive darkness that had enveloped it moments before. I sat on the floor, the rituals of release still clutched in my hands, my heart racing as I tried to process what had just happened. The weight of the experience settled in, mingling with a bittersweet sense of triumph. But there was no time to linger in relief. The knowledge that other souls remained trapped weighed heavily on me. I rose unsteadily to my feet, the basement now feeling less like a prison and more like a sanctuary, a space where the echoes of the past could finally be addressed. I made my way back to the bookshelf, feeling an undeniable pull toward it. There had to be more to uncover. As I scanned the titles, a familiar name caught my eye: The Forgotten Souls, a chronicle of lost lives. I pulled it from the shelf and opened it, my fingers tracing the delicate pages. As I read, the stories within echoed my own experiences. Each tale told of individuals who had suffered, who had unresolved pain that bound them to the earthly realm. The more I read, the more I realized that the darkness wasn't just in my basement. It was woven into the very fabric of my town's history. I stumbled upon a passage detailing a local legend. A tragic accident decades ago had claimed the lives of several children in a nearby forest, their spirits unable to find peace. I felt a chill creep up my spine. Could the shadows I had encountered be connected to this tragedy? Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to visit the forest that evening. As I stepped out of my house, the fading light cast long shadows on the ground, a reminder of the darkness I had just faced. With each step toward the forest, my heart raced, an uneasy mix of anticipation and fear. The trees loomed overhead as I ventured deeper, the whispering wind echoing the tales of lost souls. I could feel a presence around me, a tingling sensation that intensified with each passing moment. The path was overgrown, nature reclaiming what had once been a bustling area for children to play. As I reached a clearing, I paused, surveying the area. It felt different, charged with a peculiar energy. My eyes were drawn to a small mound of earth, partially hidden by weeds. The air grew still, and I felt a compulsion to dig. With bare hands, I began to unearth the soil. As the earth crumbled away, a small object emerged, a weathered wooden toy covered in dirt. It was a simple figure, perhaps a soldier or a knight, its paint chipped and faded. I could sense an overwhelming sadness emanating from it, as if it carried the weight of lost innocence. Suddenly, the air shifted, a cool breeze swirling around me. The whispers I had encountered in the basement returned, now more defined, urging me to listen. "Help us, remember us." I closed my eyes, grounding myself in the moment. "I'm here," I murmured. "I want to help you. Please, tell me what you need." The temperature dropped further, and I felt the presence of several souls surrounding me. Images began to flash through my mind. Laughter, games, and then chaos. I saw a group of children playing, their joyful shouts cut short by an accident, their spirits lingering in the aftermath. Suddenly, I was overwhelmed by their pain, their confusion. They had not wanted to leave this world. They had been taken too soon. My heart ached as I realized that they had been forgotten, lost to time, and their stories had not been told. "Your stories will be remembered," I promised, my voice breaking. "I will share your tales. You will not be forgotten." The air around me shimmered with energy, and I felt their presence draw closer, as if seeking reassurance. I clutched the toy tightly, a symbol of their lost childhood, and continued, "I will find a way to honor you, to let the world know what happened here." With each word, the atmosphere shifted. The whispers transformed into a melody, a soft, ethereal tune that wrapped around me like a comforting embrace. I could feel the weight of their sadness begin to lift, the energy shifting from despair to hope. As I sat there, surrounded by the echoes of the past, I understood that my journey was just beginning. I would be their voice, a bridge between the living and the lost. The darkness might linger, but together, we could illuminate the stories that had been buried. With a newfound sense of purpose, I stood, the toy still clutched in my hand. "I will not let your memories fade," I vowed. "You will have your peace." As I made my way back through the forest, the shadows that had once felt ominous now seemed to dance in harmony with the whispers of the past. I had faced the darkness, and in doing so, had found a glimmer of light. But I knew I had more to uncover. The basement had opened a door to a hidden world, and I was determined to explore it, to help those still trapped in the shadows. The journey ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to face whatever lay in the darkness, armed with the strength of those who had come before me. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents. It was a chilly autumn evening when I first noticed her, a woman standing alone at the bus stop at the edge of town. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows that danced eerily across the pavement. I'd seen her there a few times before, always in the same faded, oversized coat, her long, dark hair obscuring her face. As I approached the stop, I felt an odd sensation, as if the air around her vibrated with something unexplainable. I slowed my pace, trying to gauge whether I should continue past or take a moment to speak to her. Something about her presence drew me in, yet an unsettling feeling nestled in the pit of my stomach, warning me to keep my distance. She stood there, seemingly oblivious to the chill that surrounded her, her gaze fixed on the empty road ahead. I hesitated, watching her for a moment longer. Her fingers twitched at her side, and I caught a glimpse of something shiny, perhaps a locket or a ring, catching the last rays of light. The sight made me uneasy. It felt like a clue to something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface. When the bus finally arrived, its headlights cutting through the dusk, I expected her to step forward. Instead, she remained rooted in place, her posture rigid as if she were waiting for something or someone. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story than met the eye. As the doors of the bus opened, the driver glanced at her, then at me. "You getting on or not?" he called out, impatience lacing his tone. I turned back to the woman, but she still stood silently, her gaze unwavering. The bus driver sighed and rolled his eyes, then shifted his attention to the street. Feeling a mix of curiosity and concern, I decided to board the bus. As I settled into a seat by the window, I couldn't help but look back at her. She remained still, her silhouette framed by the fading light, the bus pulling away from the curb and taking me further from her. The bus rattled along, but I couldn't shake the image of her standing there, alone. What was she waiting for? Why did she seem so out of place? That night, I found myself tossing and turning, her figure lingering in my mind, weaving in and out of my dreams like a ghost. Days turned into weeks, and my routine continued. Every evening, I'd passed the bus stop, glancing over in hopes of seeing her again. Yet, she was nowhere to be found. Each time I arrived, the stop was empty, save for the flickering streetlight casting an eerie glow on the pavement. Then, one rainy night, as I hurried to catch my bus, I spotted her again. She was drenched, her hair clinging to her face, and her coat dripping water onto the ground. I hesitated, my heart racing at the thought of approaching her, but the image of her forlorn figure drove me to act. "Are you okay?" I asked as I approached, my voice barely rising above the sound of the rain. She turned to me slowly, her eyes widening in surprise. They were a striking shade of green, almost luminescent in the dim light. For a moment, I felt as if she were staring into my soul. "I'm waiting for someone," she replied, her voice soft yet haunting. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with an unspoken tension. "He's late. Do you want me to wait with you?" I offered, the concern in my voice surprising even me. I had no idea why I felt compelled to help this stranger, but something in her demeanor tugged at my heart. She hesitated, then nodded, her gaze returning to the road. I stood beside her, the rain soaking through my clothes. We stood in silence, the world around us fading into a distant hum. I tried to think of what to say, but the weight of the moment kept my thoughts locked away. "Who are you waiting for?" I finally asked, breaking the silence. The question felt awkward, but I needed to know. There was an intensity in her stillness that suggested she was more than just a woman at a bus stop. "My brother," she said softly, her voice barely audible. "He's always late." The word sent a chill down my spine. "Is he coming home from work?" She shook her head, her expression darkening. "He never came home." The revelation struck me like a lightning bolt. I had heard whispers in town about a disappearance, an unsolved case that left everyone unsettled. The brother she spoke of had been missing for years, his case growing colder with each passing day. As the rain continued to fall, I felt a surge of determination. "Have you reported it to the police? Maybe they can help." Her eyes flickered with something between hope and despair. "They don't believe me. They think I'm just a sister who can't let go." My heart ached for her. I had no idea how deep her grief ran, or how long she had been waiting. "You deserve to be heard," I said, my voice steady. "Let's figure this out together." The moment hung between us, and I could see a flicker of gratitude in her gaze. For the first time, she smiled, a small, fragile smile that lit up her face amidst the rain. But just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, replaced by a look of horror. I followed her gaze to the road, my heart dropping as I realized what she was seeing. A shadow was moving toward us, dark against the backdrop of the night, and I could feel an ominous presence in the air. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, a primal instinct urging me to flee. But I couldn't abandon her. The figure approached, and I took a step closer to the woman, ready to protect her. Just as the shadow came into view, the bus rounded the corner, its headlights illuminating the scene. For a brief moment, everything froze. The figure halted, then turned and melted back into the darkness, disappearing just as swiftly as it had appeared. I looked back at the woman, who now appeared shaken. "Let's get on the bus," I said urgently. "We'll figure this out together." But when I turned to her, she was gone, as if she had vanished into thin air. I looked around in disbelief, my heart racing. She had been right beside me, and now there was nothing but the relentless rain and the empty bus stop. I boarded the bus, my mind racing with questions. Who was she? What did she know? And where had she gone? I looked out the window as the bus pulled away, searching for her figure in the shadows, but she was nowhere to be found. As the bus rumbled on, I knew this encounter was just the beginning of something much larger. The strange woman at the bus stop had ignited a fire within me, a quest for the truth that had been hidden in the dark corners of our town. And I was determined to uncover it, no matter what it took. The bus ride felt longer than usual, my mind a whirlpool of thoughts about the woman I had just met and the unsettling events surrounding her brother's disappearance. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to her story, something that connected her to the shadows of our town. The next morning, fueled by curiosity and concern, I decided to dig deeper into the mystery. I spent hours researching the case of her missing brother. His name was Adam, and his disappearance had made local headlines a few years ago. He had been out with friends one night, but he never returned home. As I scoured online forums and news articles, I learned that the case had gone cold. Friends and family held vigils, but the police had few leads to follow. I found a few photos of Adam, his smile bright and carefree. In the background of one picture, I noticed a woman, his sister. She looked so much like the woman I had met, with the same striking green eyes. Feeling a surge of determination, I decided to visit the local police station. The station was a small, aging building that had seen better days. As I entered, a bell jingled, and a uniformed officer looked up from behind the front desk. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone skeptical. "I'm looking for information about Adam Miller's case," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I think I might have met his sister." The officer raised an eyebrow. "That's an old case. Not much to tell you. You should let the family grieve in peace." I felt a flicker of frustration, but pressed on. "I think she's still looking for him. She was at the bus stop last night, and she seemed desperate for answers." The officer sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Look, kid, I get it. It's hard to lose someone, but sometimes it's better to let go. You can't save everyone." His dismissive attitude only fueled my resolve. "But what if she's right? What if there's something more to this?" He stared at me, weighing my sincerity. Finally, he shrugged. "If you're that invested, you might want to talk to the family. They live a few blocks away. But I warn you, they're not in a good place." I thanked him and left, my heart racing with anticipation. I found the address and headed toward a modest house at the end of a quiet street. The front yard was overgrown, and the curtains hung slightly askew, hinting at neglect. Taking a deep breath, I knocked on the door. Moments later, it creaked open, revealing a middle-aged woman with weary eyes and a tired expression. "Yes," she asked, her voice cautious. "I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Jamie. I've been researching Adam's case, and I think I may have met your daughter." The woman's expression shifted, a mix of hope and fear crossing her face. "You've seen her?" "No, not Adam. Your daughter, the woman I met at the bus stop. I think she's still waiting for him," I explained, feeling the weight of my words. Tears welled up in the woman's eyes. "She's been gone for so long," she whispered. "We thought we lost her too." "What do you mean?" I asked, my pulse quickening. She hesitated, glancing back into the house. "It's complicated. After Adam disappeared, she became consumed by it. She stopped living her life, just waiting for him to come home." "Do you know where she is now?" I pressed gently. "Maybe I can help her." The woman shook her head slowly, her gaze distant. "She hasn't been the same since that night. She thinks if she waits long enough, he will return." My heart sank. I wanted to help, but I didn't know how. "Is there any way to reach her? Maybe she'll talk to me." "I don't know if she will, but if you want to try," her favorite spot was the old playground near the park. She used to go there to think. I thanked her and left, a sense of urgency propelling me forward. I headed to the playground, hoping to find the woman who had captivated my thoughts. The park was empty, save for the rustling leaves and the distant sound of children playing. As I approached the swings, I noticed a figure seated on one, rocking back and forth. My heart raced. It was her, the strange woman from the bus stop. She seemed lost in thought, her gaze distant. "Hey," I called out, approaching cautiously. "It's me again. Can we talk?" She looked up, surprise flickering in her eyes before it was replaced with recognition. You came back. I want to help," I said, taking a seat on the swing next to hers. "I spoke with your mother. She's worried about you." Her expression darkened. "My mother doesn't understand. No one does. I have to wait for Adam. What if he's not coming back?" I asked gently, feeling the weight of her grief. "What if there's something we can uncover together?" The woman sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I don't know if I can do that. What if he needs me? Maybe he wouldn't want you to be stuck in this place, waiting forever," I said. "What if you could find out what really happened to him?" She turned to me, her green eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You think I can find out? You think there's still hope?" "I believe there is," I replied, feeling a surge of determination. "Let's dig deeper, together." As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the playground, I felt a spark of hope ignite between us. It was time to confront the shadows that loomed over our town. And together, we would uncover the truth about Adam and the dark secrets that had kept her waiting for so long. The air around us was thick with unspoken fears as we sat in the fading light of the playground. I could sense her hesitation, but I also felt the flicker of hope in her eyes, a yearning to break free from the chains of her brother's disappearance. "What do we do first?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "Let's start with the last known sighting of Adam. If we can find out where he was and who he was with, it might lead us to some answers." She nodded, her resolve hardening. "I know he was with some friends that night, but I've never met them. I can try to track them down." "Good idea. If we can find one of them, they might remember something that could help us." She pulled out her phone, scrolling through her contacts. After a moment, she looked up. "I have one name, Liam. He was one of Adam's closest friends. Let's call him." I encouraged, feeling a surge of adrenaline. She dialed the number, and we waited in anxious silence. After a few rings, a voice came through the line. "Hello, Liam. This is Sarah, Adam's sister." Sarah. "Oh my God, is everything okay?" He interrupted, a note of panic in his voice. "I'm fine. I need to ask you about that night." "About Adam?" There was a pause on the other end. "I thought you weren't ready to talk about it." "It's been years." "I know, but I need answers," she said, her voice steady. "Can we meet?" Liam agreed to meet us at a coffee shop nearby, and soon we were seated at a small table, the hum of conversation around us feeling distant. Liam appeared nervous, shifting in his seat. He had a haunted look in his eyes, one that spoke of old regrets. "Thanks for coming," Sarah said, her voice firm but gentle. "I need to know what happened to Adam." Liam sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. "I've replayed that night 1,000 times in my head. It was supposed to be just a fun outing. We went to the carnival on the outskirts of town." "A carnival?" I asked, intrigued. "What was it like?" "It was strange. Not like the ones you see in movies. It had this eerie atmosphere. A lot of the rides were old and rusted, but we thought it'd be fun. We got separated when we went to the fun house." Sarah leaned forward, her eyes wide with interest. "You lost him in the fun house?" "Yeah," Liam said, his voice trembling. "I thought he was just messing around. We were all joking about the creepy mirrors and the shadows. But when I turned around to find him, he was gone. I searched everywhere, but it was like he just vanished." "What did you do?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I panicked. I thought he was playing a prank. But when I realized he was missing for too long, I went to the staff. They said they hadn't seen him leave. I tried to call him, but his phone went straight to voicemail." "What happened next?" I pressed, feeling the urgency of the moment. "We called the police, but it was too late. They searched the area but found nothing. A week later, they told us to stop looking. It felt like everyone just gave up." "That's not right," Sarah said, anger flickering in her voice. "We can't just let it go." Liam looked pained. "I know, but I've been trying to move on. I don't think there's anything more we can do." "Maybe there is," I said, my mind racing. "What if we go back to the carnival? If Adam vanished there, maybe there are clues we missed. We could check out the fun house." Liam exchanged glances with Sarah, uncertainty etched on their faces. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "Yes," Sarah replied with newfound determination. "I need to know the truth about my brother. We can't just leave it like this." "Okay," Liam relented, though I could see the fear in his eyes. "But we have to be careful. I don't want anything happening to either of you." As we finished our coffee, I felt a sense of purpose building within me. The shadows of the past were starting to lift, revealing a path forward. We would confront the unknown, unearth the truth, and perhaps give Adam the justice he deserved. With our plans set, we headed to the carnival that evening, the sky darkening above us. The air was thick with the scent of fried food and nostalgia, but a chill ran down my spine as we approached the entrance. The carnival looked even more ominous now, its lights flickering intermittently. As we stepped inside, the sounds of laughter and music faded into a haunting echo. I felt the weight of secrets lurking in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. "Let's find the fun house," I said, glancing at Sarah and Liam, who nodded in agreement. Together, we walked through the carnival, the joyous facade masking the underlying dread. The funhouse loomed ahead, its entrance draped in shadows, beckoning us closer. As we approached, a sense of foreboding washed over me. With a deep breath, I pushed the door open, and the air inside felt cooler, tinged with a sense of history. The mirrors lined the walls, reflecting our anxious faces back at us, distorting our features in unsettling ways. "Are you ready?" I whispered, feeling the weight of our quest settle on my shoulders. Sarah squeezed my hand, her resolve palpable. "Let's find out what really happened to Adam." And with that, we stepped into the labyrinth of mirrors, ready to confront the secrets that lay hidden within. As we crossed the threshold into the funhouse, the atmosphere shifted. The cacophony of carnival sounds faded, replaced by an eerie silence that wrapped around us like a shroud. The dim lighting cast long shadows that flickered and danced across the mirrored walls, creating an unsettling sense of disorientation. "Stay close," I whispered, feeling an instinctual urge to protect Sarah and Liam from whatever darkness might linger here. We moved cautiously, our footsteps echoing against the polished floors. The funhouse was a twisted maze of reflections. Some mirrors warped our images, elongating our limbs, or compressing our bodies into grotesque shapes. It felt like stepping into a nightmare where reality distorted at every turn. "Where do you think he could have gone?" Liam asked, his voice low and shaky. "It's so easy to get lost in here." "Let's just retrace our steps," Sarah suggested, her determination shining through her fear. "If we find the last place he was seen, we might discover something." As we made our way deeper into the funhouse, we encountered various attractions: spinning tunnels, wobbly bridges, and rooms filled with flickering lights. Each twist and turn heightened our anxiety, the oppressive atmosphere bearing down on us like an impending storm. Finally, we reached the heart of the funhouse, a room filled with mirrors reflecting infinite versions of ourselves. I felt a chill creep down my spine as I looked into the mirrors, half expecting to see Adam's face among the reflections. Suddenly, Sarah gasped. "Look!" She pointed at one of the mirrors. "There's something written on it." We moved closer, our hearts racing. The glass was fogged over, but as we wiped away the condensation, letters began to appear. They spelled out a chilling message: "He's closer than you think." "What does that mean?" Liam whispered, his eyes wide with fear. "I don't know," I replied, trying to suppress the rising panic. "But we need to keep moving. We can't let this place get to us." As we turned to leave, a flicker of movement caught my eye. In the corner of the room, just beyond the reach of the light, stood a shadowy figure. My heart raced as I squinted to see better, but the figure melted back into the darkness as soon as I blinked. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice trembling. "See what?" Sarah replied, scanning the shadows. "There's nothing there." "I swear I saw someone," I insisted, my instincts flaring. "We need to get out of here." We hurried back through the maze, the sense of dread amplifying with every step. The mirrors seemed to close in around us, distorting our path and taunting us with their reflections. "Wait!" Sarah suddenly stopped, her expression shifting from fear to determination. "What if we go back to where Liam last saw Adam? Right? The corner near the spinning tunnel," I recalled. "Let's head there." We navigated through the funhouse, our breaths quickening as the shadows grew thicker. Each time I glanced over my shoulder, I felt the weight of unseen eyes watching us, as if the very walls held secrets waiting to be uncovered. When we reached the spinning tunnel, I felt a sense of foreboding wash over me. The tunnel itself was dark, the lights flickering erratically, creating a dizzying effect. Liam stepped forward, peering into the darkened entrance. "This is where it all happened. I was trying to keep track of everyone, and I lost Adam right here." "Let's go inside," Sarah said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. As we entered the tunnel, the world around us spun and swirled. I gripped the sides for balance, my heart racing. Just as we reached the other side, a sudden loud crash echoed behind us, making us jump. "Was that?" Liam began, but his words were lost in the noise. "Let's keep moving," I urged, adrenaline surging through me. Emerging from the tunnel, we found ourselves in a dimly lit room filled with twisted mirrors and strange props. The air was heavy, thick with tension and the scent of dust. The shadows danced at the edges of our vision, and for a moment, I felt a chill grip my heart. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed through the room, reverberating off the walls. We all froze, our eyes darting to the source of the sound. "Did you hear that?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Before I could answer, a figure emerged from the shadows, a silhouette stepping into the light. It was a man, tall and imposing, wearing a tattered coat that seemed out of place in the funhouse. His face was obscured, hidden beneath the brim of a worn hat. "Who are you?" Liam shouted, stepping protectively in front of Sarah. The figure took a step closer, and a sense of dread washed over me. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "This place holds more than you can imagine." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you know about Adam?" The man paused, his shadowy figure wavering in the dim light. "You're looking in the wrong place. The answers you seek are deeper than you realize." "Deeper?" Sarah echoed, confusion mingling with fear. "Yes," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "The darkness hides many truths. You must decide if you are brave enough to face them." Before we could respond, the man turned and vanished back into the shadows, leaving us standing in stunned silence. "What just happened?" Liam asked, his voice shaking. "I don't know," I said, my heart racing. "But I think we need to find out what he meant. We can't give up now." As we prepared to venture deeper into the funhouse, the weight of our quest settled on my shoulders. The path ahead was fraught with danger and uncertainty, but we had to uncover the truth about Adam, no matter what it took. With the mysterious figure's warning still echoing in my mind, we pressed forward, determined to uncover the truth behind Adam's disappearance. The funhouse seemed to shift around us, each turn feeling more surreal and menacing than the last. The mirrors continued to distort our reflections, mocking our apprehension. "Let's check the next room," I suggested, glancing over at Sarah and Liam, who both nodded in agreement, though their faces were pale with fear. As we entered the next room, the atmosphere changed dramatically. The walls were painted a deep crimson, and a low, humming sound reverberated through the air, sending shivers down my spine. The room was sparsely furnished, with only a few old carnival props scattered about. Faded posters, a broken Ferris wheel, and a dusty clown mannequin that seemed to stare blankly at us. "Do you think Adam could have come in here?" Liam asked, scanning the room for any signs of life. "Maybe," I replied, my instincts tingling. "But something feels off about this place." Just then a flicker of movement caught my eye. I turned to see the clown mannequin shift slightly, as if it had breathed. My heart raced, and I instinctively took a step back. "Did you see that?" I gasped, my voice barely above a whisper. "What?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide as she followed my gaze. "The clown had moved," I said, fear rising in my chest. "It's just a doll," Liam reassured me, though his voice lacked confidence. "Right?" As if in response, the clown's painted face cracked into a sinister grin, and a chill coursed through my veins. The air thickened, and the low hum grew louder, almost vibrating in my bones. "I don't want to be here anymore," Sarah said, taking a step back toward the door. "Let's go." Before I could argue, the lights flickered, and the room plunged into darkness. Panic surged through me, and I reached out instinctively, grabbing Sarah's hand. "Stay close," I shouted, feeling my heart race as I tried to orient myself in the sudden blackness. The humming transformed into an eerie laughter that echoed all around us, bouncing off the walls and closing in like a vice. I could barely hear Liam's voice as he shouted over the cacophony, "We need to find a way out." Suddenly, the lights flickered back to life, illuminating the room once more. But when I turned to look at the clown, it was gone. In its place stood a mirror, reflecting an image that sent my heart racing, a shadowy figure standing behind us. "Look out!" I screamed, spinning around, but there was nothing there, just an empty room filled with the remnants of forgotten joy. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "You look pale." "I swear I saw someone," I insisted, scanning the room for any sign of movement. "Maybe we should just leave," Liam suggested, his face ashen. "This place is messing with our heads." As we moved toward the exit, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I glanced back at the mirror one last time. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a hand reaching out from the other side, but when I blinked, it was gone. We stepped into the next corridor, which felt more like a tomb than a funhouse. The atmosphere was thick with an oppressive silence, broken only by the sound of our footsteps. As we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being drawn deeper into a trap. "Where do you think we should go now?" Sarah asked, her voice shaky. "There's got to be a way to the exit," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Let's keep moving." We continued down the dimly lit corridor until we reached a heavy wooden door, its surface scarred and weathered. It stood ajar, a faint light seeping through the crack. "Should we check it out?" Liam asked, glancing at the door warily. "We have to. It might lead us to Adam," I said, pushing the door open wider. Inside was a small room filled with old carnival relics, dusty boxes, faded photographs, and an array of strange objects that seemed to whisper secrets from the past. In the center stood a large, ornate mirror, its frame intricately carved with images of twisted faces. "Wow," Sarah breathed, stepping closer. "This place is incredible and kind of creepy." I nodded, mesmerized by the mirror. It felt like it was pulling me in, urging me to look closer. "I think we should search this room. Maybe there's something here that can help us." As we rummaged through the clutter, I couldn't shake the feeling that the mirror was watching us. I glanced back at it, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flash of movement in its depths, a fleeting glimpse of something dark and twisted. "Hey, look at this," Liam called out, pulling out an old journal from one of the boxes. The leather cover was cracked, and the pages were yellowed with age. "What does it say?" Sarah asked, leaning over to see. As Liam began to flip through the pages, a chill ran down my spine. The entries were scrawled in frantic handwriting, detailing a series of bizarre occurrences, disappearances, strange sounds in the night, and a warning about a shadow that lurked in the funhouse. "Guys, this is not good," Liam said, his voice shaky. "It talks about a dark figure that takes children. It says the mirror is a gateway." I felt a wave of dread wash over me. "A gateway? To what?" "I don't know, but we need to get out of here," Sarah said, glancing nervously at the mirror. Suddenly, the lights flickered again, plunging the room into darkness. Panic set in as I reached for Sarah and Liam, but I felt an icy grip on my shoulder, something cold and unseen. "Run!" I shouted, tearing away from whatever was holding me. We bolted toward the door, the laughter echoing around us, blending with the frantic pounding of our hearts. The air grew thick, making it hard to breathe as we scrambled for the exit. Just as we reached the door, the lights flickered back on, revealing the mirror behind us. But this time, it reflected not just our terrified faces, but a dark silhouette standing in the background, looming closer with every heartbeat. "Go, go, go!" I yelled, pushing through the door and stumbling into the corridor beyond. The fear that gripped us propelled us forward, leaving the dark secrets of the funhouse behind us. But the shadow from the mirror lingered in my mind. As we made our escape, I couldn't help but wonder if we had truly escaped, or if the darkness would follow us, waiting for the moment to strike again. Don't forget to subscribe in the channel and like the video for more contents.